Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining to this amazing event. Hi everyone. Hi Taylor. Hi Amer.
Hey guys.
Hey
Hey,
guys. Hi.
welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining. Taylor, your camera's not open, I think.
I think I might need permission to turn it on.
Oh, what about
There we
now?
go. That works.
Great.
Awesome.
Yeah, there you are. Good to see you.
Cool. Good to see you guys.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining. This is a really exciting event. Today we're going to learn more about Snaptrude AI and one of the most awaited tools that architects were dreaming of it. So Taylor will, of course, definitely cover the tool in a great detail. So I think we're also live in YouTube. Uh, People who can't make it watching live and following it, they can also just watch it on YouTube as well. But in the meantime, the videos will be available in high quality after the event and PA Academy's website as well. It will be added into your account so you can go and watch it again. So thanks everyone for joining. And I wanted to just join and say hello, and I'll just leave the floor for Amer to do some introduction and start the event. Then we will get back to just kicking off the session and going with Taylor to showcase the lecture and Snapchat.
Well, great. Thank you so much. Well, Taylor, thank you for joining and thank you for being a part of
Absolutely.
this. So before we start, could you just briefly let us know what we're gonna learn in those 4 hours? What are we gonna cover in those 4 hours?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. In order to do that, you guys care if I share my screen really quick? I put together just like a
Oh,
sample slide.
sure. If you like, you can just give us like a very brief summary in like a minute or two.
Sure.
Because I also need to do an introduction to PA Academy, and we can start after that.
Of course. Yep. No worries. So basically what we'll be doing is we've broken it, into four separate modules for the 4 hours. What I'd like to do, and especially for this, is, one, acknowledge that everyone designs in a little bit of a different way. So kicking off, we'll basically learn, three different methods to start a project within Snaptrude that involve varying levels of AI, all the way down from, fully kicking off project in AI to a little bit more of a manual approach. And then from there, we'll start to, add further detail into the actual design concept, and start to add more building entourage and basically making the scene come alive so that we can really sell the vision. And then the final portion will be basically us getting into present mode, looking at some of our AI rendering features within present mode, and also utilizing that to actually create an entire conceptual presentation. So the idea for this would be, the first module will be kind of multiple options for how we can start, but then we'll hone in and then create a project all the way through and try and get to a full presentation by the end.
Well, great. Cannot wait to start. Before we start, though, I'm gonna just give a brief intro into all the updates on PA Academy, and then you can share your screen and we can start the session.
Love it.
Awesome. Just give me a moment to share my screen.
Tyler, what time is it for you there? Is it 7, 8?
Pretty early.
6 a.m. Well,
Oh,
6:10 right
6.
now. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Quite
So
early.
Yeah.
Okay, nice.
it's early on our end. Yep.
Yeah, yeah,
I'm out in Denver, so
yeah. Fresh morning. Nice. We have
all
a
right.
lot of people from all over the world. We have from Saint Lucia. We have from Bangladesh, Nigeria, Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, Syria, Jordan, Colombia, Spain, Morocco, Verona, Australia, Colorado, UK, Rome, Italy, US, Texas, Denver, US, Riyadh, Jordan, and everywhere else. So please tell us where you're joining from in New York, Latvia, India, Turkey, Spain, Germany, Chicago, Chile, Tunisia, Cairo, Mumbai. And as we move forward, probably more people from the West Coast will join as well.
You said
Uh,
someone joined from Syria. Do you guys need a VPN there to open Zoom? I'm not sure. So if
Probably.
they're joining through all that struggle, thank you for being here. So let me just start quickly.
Nice. Yes, Abbas Ahmed is from Syria. Iraq, Mexico, Atlanta. Cool, let's go.
Okay, wait, I think I need to share my entire screen. Hold on. Okay, should be fine now. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Great.
Yes, we can.
Awesome. So welcome everyone once again to the event. So if you go to our upcoming courses here, you can see that we have another event today in an hour after this event ends, around 6 p.m. GMT. We have Design Tech Talk. And the weekend after that, we're gonna actually have one of Design Tech Talk speakers teach a workshop. He is the lead designer at MVRDV. This workshop is going to be focused on Rhino modeling and AI. So check this workshop out. And the weekend after, we have AI-powered design ideation with Mohammed Fendi. This is going to be kind of a different structure from our normal workshops. It's going to be a 1-day, 8-hour workshop. It's going to focus entirely on Midjourney and how Mohammed Fendi creates his very unique designs. So check this workshop out as well. The weekend after, we have a member-only workshop, Body Architecture 4, with Filippo. This is the 4th version of this workshop, and it's gonna be a body centric design focused workshop. So if you guys have watched any of the previous workshops, or if you're familiar with Filippo's work, then you're gonna find this workshop very interesting. You just need an active membership to join this workshop. So the weekend after, we have Sub-D Intelligence with Sarah. This is going to be pretty self-explanatory, a Sub-D workshop with AI. Sarah is a Zaha Hadid architect. So her workshop is going to be interesting. Check this one out as well. The weekend after that, we have a free event, Run Diffusion End-to-End AI Visuals for Architecture. It's going to be taught by 2 instructors, June Chow and Alex Wilson. You don't need a membership or anything for this workshop. You can just join it for free. And the weekend after, we have Parametric Brickscapes by Chavi Mehta. She's an ex-Zaha Hadid, and also her co-instructor, Arya Gupta. This workshop is going to be a result of the research that they've been doing. It's a very cool idea. You guys also should attend this workshop. It's very interesting. And lastly, on the first weekend of January, we have AI and Parametric Negotiation 2.0 with Kedar. This is our second workshop with him. So yeah, this workshop is gonna focus entirely on Comfy UI. So if Comfy UI is interesting to you and you don't have much experience in it, you can join this workshop. It is beginner friendly. What else? Lastly, if you want to join all the workshops I just mentioned with one membership, you can check our full access membership. And we also have our normal pro membership. This is it for the introduction. Now we're gonna go back to Taylor.
Cool. Do you guys want me to jump on screen sharing? We can get into it. I want to make sure if there's anything else that give you the chance to do that.
Yeah, feel free to start.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thank you guys for having me and the rest of the Snaptrude team on here today. We're excited to show you guys around. For reference, I'm not the only one from Snaptrude here. We have several of our team members are also in the chat. So as questions roll in, if I don't see it directly, someone from there will be able to answer it and sort of help you guys out, especially if there's really specific questions or anything along those lines. So feel free to drop those in the chat. A little bit of just background about myself. I practiced architecture for about 6.5 years, Perkins and Will, prior to leaving architecture for architectural tech. So since then, I've worked at a couple of companies that built 3D software for architects. So this is one of my passions. I'm really excited about new tools, and especially about sharing new tools and actually how you can utilize them in workflows to design faster, better, and honestly make design a little more fun, right? So I'll be really excited to share all of this and kind of go through it. 4 hours is obviously a big chunk of time, so I've tried to time everything out as best as I can, and I'll try and make sure that I give everyone some breaks and chances to catch up if they need to. So with that, what I will go ahead and do, I'm going to share my screen really quick and get a few things set up. Let's share. And then once I get this shared, if you all could let me know how things look, if anything's unreadable or, not super easy to see, or if we're looking good.
All good, I think. If you can just zoom in a bit more.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll zoom in here and we can, get into things. So I've got basically, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, I've got this course basically laid out into 4 separate modules. And so right now we'll go ahead and we'll kick off module 1 here. But I'll do like a quick overview of every module prior to actually kicking it off, just so that we know exactly what we're doing, right? So for this is going to be basically our 3 different methods to starting a project. So in this scenario, we're going to be looking at a full AI approach using our newly released Snaptrude AI. We'll also look at a hybrid approach that's going to blend a little bit more of like manual project kickoff and creation with some AI tools to assist in that workflow. And then just to give like a really good orientation of how Snaptrude works, at its core, at the basis. I do want to show you like a couple things for how you could start a project just fully manually if you wanted. I think that's one of the really good things about Snaptrude, is that it doesn't force you into one specific approach. And I always try to acknowledge the fact that, every designer, every firm, essentially everyone who uses a 3D modeling tool is going to use it a little bit differently. So I do want to try and accommodate that here as well. One thing that I will mention prior to this, if you do want to follow along, the chat, everyone's sort of adding their emails to get added for the pro license. If you'd like to go, just sign up for Snaptrude and get everything set up then so that you can follow along. I can also share project files or links to the projects at the end of each module, so that if you would like to, be pretty lockstep with what I'm doing, you could do that. Just be sure to touch base with our team over in the chat on the side here. And so with that, once we're done with module 1, the goal will be to essentially go from 0 to 1 quicker, to utilize AI to help generate our programs, our vertical adjacencies, and sort of getting the initial project information sorted out, right? So with that, I am going to go ahead and just get started. If there's any issues with the recording or anything freezing, just feel free to ping me, and I'll try and get that sorted as quick as possible. So I am going to jump in, and we'll just actually start from a new model. And what I'm going to do here is, we'll just go PA webinar, and let's do a new project here. So once you kick off a new project within Snaptrude, you'll be presented with this screen here. This is basically the project kickoff screen, regardless of the workflow that you want to use. So you have the option to basically prompt an entire design concept, or you can also start from scratch. So for this exercise and for version 1, we're going to be looking at the full sort of AI 0 to 1 workflow here. So what we'll do is we're actually going to use our prompt box, and we're going to start loading up some information here. So for this project specifically, we can attach an RFP. So I have an RFP saved. That's basically just a building program as a PDF. You don't necessarily have to use this. Once we get to a final output, I'll share a file that we can all work on. What this does is give you an opportunity, any sort of PDF you have that specifies a building along with its program and the spatial requirements of that, you can upload that here to be basically interpreted as your program, and it'll start to generate the information based off of that. The second thing that I'm going to go ahead and do is actually just load our site. So this project, because I used to practice in Seattle, I'm going to go to Seattle, Washington. And we're going to load in our site. So this will give you the ability to geolocate the site just for like contextual awareness, so that you can, obviously model with context in mind. But the other thing that this will do is this will set you up so that once the AI runs, it'll know your geographic location and have the ability to cater some of the streaming process to that. So as I do this, I'm going to go center in on a site over here. And I'm going to toggle on a couple options on this right side panel. So right off the bat, you'll see, we have the option to add the elevation, buildings, and the satellite data. What you'll see here, elevation is actually going to pull in the full 3-dimensional topo solid that you can start to model on. So this is particularly helpful, if you have steep grade on your site, or you want to have that influence the design concept at all. So for this, I'm just going to have all of them toggled on. The last one, if you are in the US, we do have the ability to roll in specific property lines. And so as you can see here, I can hover over these and select them. Our site is going to actually merge multiple properties together for today. So I'll select all of these. And one thing that I'm going to make sure is that I have merge adjacent parcels set up. So what this will do is just convert all of these parcels into one site. I'll get this all centered here, and I'm going to go ahead and click on load site. So now what we've done here is we've uploaded our RFP and we've given it our site. Now we can add a prompt in if we would like to steer it in the right direction. In this case, the RFP is going to take care of most of the, typology and program requirements. So I can keep the prompt really simple. But best practices for anyone who's, exploring this just from a raw, prompt first basis. And I definitely encourage like some experimentation here. It's always best to be really descriptive, especially with the program that you're looking for. Because the more information that you give it as far as the program requirements and the areas that you might be trying to get to, the more it will be able to not have to make any assumptions about that, right? So, we talk a lot about AI with hallucinations, right? And, hallucinations are essentially having to come up with detail where, there might not be any. Sometimes that's a bad thing. If you're, doing renderings, then it's hallucinating random objects. Other times, you can start to ask it to make, we call sometimes hallucinations, creative assumptions here, right? So giving it the opportunity to take some of those assumptions, if it doesn't have the information, or use the information that you give it, is something that you'll have to experiment with in prompting. For this, I'm just going to say create a multi-family residential project based on the batched RFP. So I'll prompt this. This will be pretty simple. And what this is going to do is kick off the entire streaming process here. One thing that I will mention too, this process typically takes about 10 minutes to generate. And it's going to go through, a series of steps and start establishing a logic for how it's going to go out laying out this building, and essentially assigning the adjacencies and the sort of vertical distribution. And so like one thing that I do want to mention here is that, this solution right now that we're looking at, it's not like a prompt and get a finished building, right? This is really geared towards architects. And so the whole point of this is to provide a logical sort of streaming process to give you a lot of the information that you need to be able to make decisions that are relating to your design and then start implementing those, right? So the output of this will be more of, think of it like a 3-dimensional adjacency diagram that is particularly helpful with distributing your program amongst the stories of the building. And so I'll show you a little bit more what it looks like when I actually start designing with this output, but I just want to make sure, that we sort of understand where we're working to with this. So the output is not necessarily going to be a finished building. It's going to be essentially all of the blocks organized in a way that help us to better create a building that incorporates our targets right off the bat. And so with that, this process, again, I mentioned will take about 10 minutes. I don't want to just sit here and watch it streaming the whole time. So what I'm actually going to do, and what I think would be helpful while this is streaming, would be to kind of zoom out for a quick second and just give you guys like a high level overview of like what the actual Snaptrude editor looks like here. You can see it's pulling in our site and information and starting to stream some of this process. And so while this, starts streaming here, I'm going to go ahead and open another tab and just give you like a quick overview of the different areas of Snaptrude so that you feel like you're oriented to things as you, jump in and get familiar with the user interface. So we'll let this stream. I'm actually going to pull this off to the side here. And let's do this. And let's go open a finish model so we can sort of see where we could design to. Okay. So again, this is basically a sample model that we've put together. The whole premise here is, really to show you what it looks like to get to a finished output in Snaptrude that you've actually taken and started designing with, right? So to give you a little orientation of how the Snaptrude user interface is built and how it works, we've basically compartmentalized this into 4 primary areas with one sort of AI mode. And so the AI mode is, this streaming process that we can see happening right here. And we'll kind of dig deeper into that here in a second once the streaming process is complete. But the rest of this is where you can really take full control over the design itself. So what we can do here is we can see that there's basically 4 tabs. I like to describe these as like the 4 different areas where you can do your work. Obviously, being architects, you have to be really versatile and you do lots of different type of work. Not everything that you need to do as an architect needs to be done in a 3D canvas. And so that's reflected here. So this design mode is basically where you'll be taking into account like all of the actual, design of the model itself. This is going to, feel similar to, SketchUp, definitely, maybe Rhino a little bit here. But the idea here is, this will give you the opportunity to really start designing those spaces and creating things. I also see a couple questions streaming in. I know Adnan and Archit and a couple of the guys on the call. Feel free to ping me if there's any questions here, or if someone wants to answer some of those as we go through. Looks like someone asked, is it possible to have existing building? Walter, if you'd like, there is a process that you can import models from Rhino or Revit. So if you're doing like as-built conditions or a tenant improvement where you need to bring that shell in, you certainly could do that. And so as we're looking at the design mode here, again, this will be where you do all the design. One thing that is a little bit different about Snaptrude compared to, SketchUp or Rhino is a little bit about overall positioning. So Snaptrude itself is sort of sits in the middle of, these SketchUps and the Rhinos of the world and the Revits of the world. And what I mean by that is Rhino and SketchUp are really fantastic 3D modeling tools, and I don't think anyone would really, question their efficiency as a 3D modeling tool. Where they tend to fall short is with the actual early stage data that you need to be able to validate a lot of your decision-making process. And so what I mean by that is, specifically around programming in areas and early stage design, right? SketchUp, it's very challenging to do that at all. Rhino, you can sometimes do that as long as, you have a computational designer on your team or a complex plugin to do that. And so that's where they tend to fall short of some of that more data. On the other side of things, you have Revit. Revit's a really great documentation tool, and it's also obviously good for hosting a lot of the architectural specific data that you might need. Where it falls short is its ability to actually model a full project here. And so Snaptrude will sit in the middle of that, where we'll pair this design mode with the actual data that represents our program. So that'll sort of segue me into the next area of Snaptrude that we'll take a look at. And this is called program mode. So when I open this will bring up a new tab. Let's see here. I think I might need to turn my camera off for a quick second. All right. Hey, just to confirm, can everyone still see okay?
Yeah, all good.
Okay, cool. It was giving me a little bit of a delay on my end. So what we're looking at here is essentially our program mode. So program mode, and we can turn this off for now. Program mode is going to be where we handle all of the actual programming of the design concept itself. And so in this area, that the most important thing about this is actually going to be the fact that this spreadsheet is going to be directly associated with the design concept that we have. So any spaces that I add or adjust in the programming sheet are going to be uploaded in the design sheet as well. So I just wanted to share that just so that you kind of understand how that relationship works a little. There's will essentially serve as a vehicle basically for you to start transitioning your model from a high level massing concept into a finished BIM model here. And so this is, we like staging area, right? So you can start to do a lot of the associations with the families that you have and actually convert your model into basically a Revit-ready model that if you do need to export that for later you can do so into actually Santiago, so you asked a question here. We can definitely get into that as we start modeling this a little bit more. The final area, and I am unsure my screen. Okay, there we go. The final area we'll take a look at here is going to be the actual present mode. So within present mode, you'll be able to basically take all the work that you've done in Snaptrude and actually start creating presentations out of it. So you can see this is basically a quick board that we've loaded up. And all of this will be accessible through your Sheets panel here. And then you'll also have the ability to pull in specific views to the scene. So you can see, we're starting to put together presentations. We're actually starting to use AI to render over these, as well as create some videos just using Google VO directly within the canvas. So this is probably one of the more fun parts of the entire design process, is being able to finish up a design and actually go in and present it and sort of sell the vision, right? So that is a really high level overview. I wanted to touch on that while this streaming is happening. Let's jump back and see how the streaming is. And it looks like we're looking good over here. So I'm going to close this model really quick. And it looks like we're getting towards the end of the streaming process here. So what we can do is basically start to look at some of the way that this is thinking, in a sense. And I'm going to try to turn my camera on. I was getting a little bit of a delay. If I have to turn it off again, I might. But as far as how this works, what it's going to do is basically think through the whole process based on your prompt in the program, right? So we started here, with the overall site context. As you're doing this, I definitely encourage you to explore this little drop down. So there's a caret you can click here. And what this is going to do is basically provide the overall thinking process for how our AI is interpreting your request into a design concept, right? So we've given it our location, the Yesler Terrace in Seattle, Washington. It starts to evaluate the topography of the site, the climate, and just starts to give that really general information that's helpful, especially with early stage planning. A lot of this information here that is providing as far as orientation, transportation, access, and circulation. Like, I used to have to work in jurisdictions where they cared very deeply about all of this information and how our project relates to this. And so having the ability to just get this information, at least a first pass of it right off the bat, is hugely helpful, because you can start to mentally understand the constraints here. So the benefit of this is twofold, right? This is all informing the design and the output that it's creating, but is also giving you like a supercharged brief into the site, what's happening with the site, looking at some of the site constraints along with the zoning districts. If there's any challenges where it can't figure out what the actual zone is, like in this case, the height limitation is challenging for it to figure out. I suspect this is because we're merging multiple sites together. And so you can start to see some of the assumptions that it's making here and how it's going about this, right? So getting into zoning assumptions, I don't want to spend, the whole time just reading through all of this. So as you guys are going through, I would certainly encourage you to just like read through this process and check it out. And pick the information that's helpful to you. And you can start to bring that into, present mode later if you wanted to. So that's how it evaluates the site. Once it has the idea of the site, they'll do the exact same thing for every single step, excuse me. So we can take a look, at the program creation, right? So what it's doing is establishing the departments here. It's reading the context that we've created and the document that we've provided and starting to associate that with the model that we're creating. So it'll go through this entire logic process where we've got the residential department. Now it's going to talk about the unit mix and how it's starting to evaluate this. We've got it's adding the services in here as well. And so it'll give us, high level overview of how it's interpreting the services, the retail, and these are all of the areas, that we've specified. So, this is a multifamily project that's relatively simple. So I think there's probably going to be 4 departments overall. And then it'll give you just a summary of that. So as you're going through, you'll be able to see this is what it's, interpret or request as, and this is the actual program that it's going to start implementing and building here. So obviously, these are going to be areas, counts, and cumulative totals for each space, as well as the departments here. But, the next part of this process really gets into sizing everything. So you can start to see sort of the logical approach where it goes from, high level site and constraints down to program and starting to look at even sizing this. And what it'll do is it'll use a lot of best practices and overall standards, depending on the typology, to help create some of these sizing suggestions. These, again, as with anything, AI, all of these are suggestions. You can override them once you get into design mode if you like, but the whole point is really giving you a basis to start from that is grounded in your program. And so once it does that, it'll give you, even more information. So now we can start to see the breakdown visually of units. I find this is really helpful for early stage planning and design, just being able to say, it's one thing to look at a table that represents all of the spaces. It's another thing as architects to see visually how this is being output, right? So these are all the spaces we're going to try and include just as blocks. Because 4 hours is obviously a long time, but I don't want to bore you guys with putting in every space. So we'll try and incorporate most of these spaces into the design as we go. And then the next thing that it'll do is, after it has all this information, it'll get into sharing a vertical stacking plan. This is, for me as, designer, I think the most helpful thing, because I'm really big on designing. I like to take control of the overall massing and envelope of the design. But when it gets into like spatial planning and programming the spaces, there's a lot of decision making that needs to be taken about what goes where, what the typical floor plate looks like, and how this all plans out from a vertical basis. So this is going to basically assign all the program to the correct level in the floor plan. And then it'll provide just same for the actual overall departments. Last thing that it's going to give you is it's going to give you like high level inspiration imagery. This is not going to be like a direct rendering of, the project. It's just going to say, hey, this is how you could go ahead and visualize this project. It'll give one image of the exterior, one of the interior, and start to just give you something to kick off of. So this streaming plot process is now, fully complete here. And again, I want to position this as, this is meant to be a starting point for you to start on a canvas that already has all the information that you need to start making those decisions here. So what you'll see once you get the output, and this is really important to understand as far as like the Snaptrude hierarchy goes, the output is going to be 2 objects basically. So on the left side here, we have what is called the department objects. So these are going to be the cumulative objects that represent all the spaces within them. These will take into account a rough grossing factor. So if you do need to, have the circulation and support spaces in there, you can utilize that. And then the other one that is going to output is actually the spaces itself. So you'll see that, we've got a residential floor plate here with, an entire floor area. But then we also have the actual units that are going to go in that floor plate here. So this is, one of those things where, again, because a lot of the design process is still on, us as the designers, we can kind of pick and choose how we want to approach this design and which methodology we want to use to start building this up, right? So I see a question about the input data used to better the program. If if you're asking specifically about like how it interprets your input, it'll customize that more to your request, but your user inputs are not going towards training the AI, if that's the question that you're asking. The AI that we're building is trained on its own set of contextual information and documentation. And so all that data is actually pre-provided on our end. So you don't need to worry about, you know, us basically training on your specific prompts or anything along those lines, because we have our own repository of information that helps it make its decisions. So those are the two outputs you can get here. We can filter it, you know, in the layers process. So I can turn off spaces, and you can see those are the space objects. I can toggle off departments. Those are the department objects. I'll show you, we'll be actually be using one of these to develop further on and add more detail to it throughout the course. So I'll probably leave this here, because the next step will basically be in module 2 is basically how I make a decision about whether I want to work with departments first, whether I want to work with, you know, these spaces first, or how I want to go about sort of blending these together. So I'll go through that decision-making process next. But what I want to do for now, and I think we probably have, I want to try and wrap this module up in about 20 minutes or so. I want to show you 2 of the other approaches to creating a project, just so that you feel like you have the tools that you need to start a project in a way that's going to be the most beneficial for you. Because maybe, you know, the full AI workflow is, you know, not exactly what you need for your process. And so we can start to look at a couple other ways to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. I'm going to open a new tab here, and I'm just going to go to Snaptrude. We'll make a new model, a new project here. So I'll just click on new project. And in this workflow, I'm now sort of moving on to the hybrid kickoff method. So the hybrid method is going to be basically an AI assisted approach, where you'll be, you know, prompting it and asking for the specific things, and the AI will be giving those outputs. So for this method, I'll start on a blank canvas. We'll just say hybrid approach. PAA. Oops, I'm spelling things wrong. It's still early in the morning. And I'm going to go ahead and create this project. So as I do this, it's going to start us basically in the full manual mode. And we'll have the opportunity to import those contextual models. So if you do have project information or underlays or other models that you need to reference, I know there's a question about adding existing buildings for reference. You could do that here, or you could click on load site to add your site location. I'm not going to do this now, because I do want to show you where this actually lives in the user interface, if you'd like to go and do either of these at any point of the design process. So right now we're in basically full manual design mode. To import that site, you could go ahead and you can click on your project name here. If you click on import, this will pull up that import dialog where you can start to import, you know, several model types and data. For this one, you know, we can add our topo solid here with this bottom selection just called topo solid, and I'll import site, and I could just navigate, you know, right back to Seattle for this project here. And then again, I more want to show you just sort of where you can find this in this workflow, because I know that it's not going to kick off, you know, in the exact same way. So I just want to make sure that you can use basically the same information, the same site, even, you know, the same RFP that we're going to be looking at, and approach this in a different method, right? So what I'll go ahead and do is I'll select the site really quick, because we saw how this works in the initial kickoff, same deal. I'm going to merge adjacent parcels. I'll import this here. But what I really want to show for this hybrid workflow, and I'm going to select all this and just move it off to the side. What I really want to show within this hybrid workflow is actually how you could start to layer in AI in a more sequential approach. So to do that, I'm going to navigate to that program tab that we looked at before. Now you can see I've got this panel on the left side, which is going to allow me to start prompting things. So there's a couple options that you have here. Design is what we use to create that really high level stacking and you know, the full AI stack output. But for this, what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to use something called interpret. So interpret's going to be really helpful if you actually are starting a project and you actually have like a spreadsheet that, you know, you've created or that you've been provided by your firm, your team, or your client even. And so this will give you an opportunity to upload a CSV here. So I've got that same program as a CSV. And I'm just going to open this here. This is just going to import all the information directly into program mode. So what we can see here, if I expand these fields, is, this is not formatted in any sort of way aside from what I've formatted my document as. So my document was not a very, pretty export by any means. So the important thing here is that it's giving us all of the data that we need and that we want to, incorporate into our design. So as of now, this data is not linked at all to the design canvas. What we need to do is basically be a little bit more prescriptive here with how we want our AI to go ahead and interpret this. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to select all of the departments and spaces. And so I'll just drag and I'll select these. Whoops, that's actually not the select tool. We'll drag and I'll select everything, and we'll make sure that we want to grab our category, our subcategory, which is mostly going to be associated with the spaces, and all this information here, because we want to generate a program that's tied in with Snaptrude based on this information. So now with this selected, I can go ahead and I can say convert the selected cells to a building program. And what I'll do here is I'll prompt this. And what this is going to do is evaluate the cells that I've selected and actually convert them into a program sheet that is now live linked to my design canvas. So this will take just a couple seconds here normally. And you can see what it's done is given us an output. Again, it's always going to try and lay out that logic and the decision-making process so that you can go back and basically evaluate the decision-making and test the assumptions against what you're actually hoping to get from the output here. So again, this is something that I don't want to just read through AI outputs the whole time. I definitely encourage you to just sort of explore these and see how that process is going and how it's making decisions here. So once it does this, if you look now at your bottom tab in your programming sheet, let me see if I can zoom in, maybe make it, nope, I won't make it bigger here. You can see there's basically two tabs. So we have that building program that we've just imported, but now program data is the tab that's going to be directly associated with your spaces itself. So now you can see basically it's created a high level programming spreadsheet of all the spaces that we wanted to import. Before I get a little bit into program mode, I want to mention too that this is the point where it creates that link back into the Snaptrude canvas, right? So now all these programming spaces are pulled into the canvas as blocks. So it's going to pull in the department. You can see the department is basically wrapping the spaces and the individual spaces itself. So it's added a block for circulation corridors. Maybe we don't necessarily want that, right? So we'll go ahead and we'll do some modifications here to our program in AI mode so we can see what that looks like. So that's really key component to program mode, and especially this hybrid approach is, once that interpret process happens, this program is now live linked to the design canvas and has actual geometry that's representing it. So the color is going to represent the overall department, and then you can see the spaces within that as well. There's one nuance here that I would like to mention just for clarity. At the bottom of every list here of the departments, you'll see that it's going to give a space label that is matched to the department. So there's a little bit of logic here where when the space label is matching the department, this is actually going to create a department level object. And those are these transparent objects that we see here, right? So this is that object here, that's that department level object where we can actually start to see that. Move it so we can get it out. And so again, in the same way that AI Stack provided two versions of that sort of vertical stack building, we want to provide the ability to design this in a way that feels natural to you. So sometimes design teams might not necessarily want to start with spaces. In my background, I worked with with a lot of commercial developers who did a lot of office projects, and the intent was for tenant improvements to come in later and fill these. So there's a lot of core and shell projects. In that scenario, spaces themselves are less valuable because we simply don't know what the spaces are going to be. So we would typically use something like this to help define the high level departments and space distribution. On the flip side of that, though, you have projects where they're like could say like a K through 12 or an institutional project, where the spatial requirements are much more, figured out from the very beginning. And so that, lends itself well to actually starting with these objects as sort of individual spaces, being able to understand and prioritize the adjacencies here. So that's going to be one method, that you can start to utilize here for that project kickoff. Let's go ahead and jump back in and show you some of the other features that you can start to access here with an interpret, right? So I could go ahead and I can change the mode here. Once we have a program in, we can ask it to do several things. Probably won't have time to get into every single one of them, but we could use like update program. So what this will do is actually give us an opportunity to change things. So like this circulation and corridors project, I'm probably going to account for this later through like overall grossing areas. And I probably don't want this to be a singular object. So I could actually just go ahead and say like, let's say, remove the and or corridors from the program sheet. So I can remove these, it'll prompt. And so now, this update program will be making changes directly to these spaces. And you can see it's basically removed this line item from that programming sheet. So we don't need to worry about that object being in there anymore. It doesn't have a target and it's not affecting the areas at all. So you can start to, work with your program and fine tune it by using update program. Again, you can also create charts. So we'll just see, let's say create a chart that gives a high level. I spelled create wrong. Let's see if AI can understand me instead of fixing it. It gives a high level overview of the departments in our program. And I'll go ahead and I'll send this. And again, this is really about trying to show you some of the steps that you can take to start working. Oops, I have to select the data. I forgot to do that. So we'll select it based on this. And let's just copy and paste this prompt. And let's go ahead and do this again. So we'll select the data, tell it what information we want it to create in a chart. This is going to try and create a chart out of the entire project here. But you can see basically it's starting to give us this overview in a sheet-like environment. So again, this is really helpful for just visualizing things in a way that you need for project specifically. And you can change this to a pie chart. It's all associated here with the project. So that's going to be another method that you can start to utilize AI in this sort of like hybrid approach for kicking off a project. I've got on my initial timer probably about 10-13 minutes. Amit, if that's correct for this first module. I want to make sure that I can wrap things up in time. So there's a couple more things that I think would be helpful in this hybrid approach to show you basically how you could go about this planning process. And one of those will actually be one of the AI features that we have built into our design mode here. So if we wanted to go ahead and, let's say we're using that space first approach where we actually want to start planning the spaces from, I call it like an inside out approach. So this would be saying, let's go ahead and actually start planning like the ground floor. So maybe on the ground floor, we want to specify what the ground floor looks like instead of having AI do it. I'm going to go ahead and select all of our department objects here. So I'm going to right click this just for reference, so you know how to do this in the future. Select similar, and that is going to select, all the department objects. I need to do this in the project. And I'm just going to use the hotkey H to hide them. And so I can work with my spaces. So let's go ahead and, do a quick mock-up. And so we want to plan the first floor. So we want the lobby, we want the mailroom, and maybe we want, a couple of 3 bedrooms, a couple of 2 bedrooms, and some 1 bedrooms and some studios on this ground level. And again, this is, part of this process was automated with AI, but in this case, the hybrid workflow, maybe we want to take more control over that. So we can say that we want that, and maybe we want to have obviously retail on this ground level. So I can add basically this subset of spaces here and start working with them if I'd like. So one thing I can do is I could go ahead and I could select all these. And one of the other, AI tools that's really helpful in this hybrid workflow is called adjacencies. So I can go ahead and click adjacencies here, and you can see it's trying to calculate. It'll start drawing lines between all these spaces and all the spaces in the project overall. But I'm going to actually just start from scratch so you can see what this would look like. So I'm going to select similar. I'm just going to delete these adjacencies that it's suggesting initially because I want to restart from basically a blank canvas here. So if I select all these spaces and head to adjacencies, I want to study adjacencies for space level objects. So I'll click on spaces here. Whoops, and I accidentally did that again. On spaces, let's delete these. Off the bat, just for reference, so you know what's happening, it's going to try and calculate the adjacencies for all of the program imports. If you want to, you can just select all those like I just did and delete them. And then we'll go in and I'll click on compute here. And what this is going to do is it's going to use basically a set of standards, depending on your typology, to try and understand and suggest how these spaces should be laid out and what spaces should be connecting to each other and what spaces shouldn't be connecting to another, and what spaces might want to be connecting to each other. And so this will take just a little bit to do, but it's helpful to just understand some of the different tools and the different ways that you can approach this, as a designer. There's a question on national standards. There's a set of standards that we pull in, several standards. I don't have all of them off the top of my head, but you can start to see those. Should actually give us the standards that it's using to make some of these decisions on the side. You can't necessarily upload your own standards just yet. That's something that we'll be working on, is the ability to add sort of more custom information to help create those. And Alex's, while we're waiting, I can answer a couple of these questions. Alexi is asking to directly remove or edit information in the cellular program. Yes, you can. You just go modify the areas if you wanted to, and you could start to change those areas around or modify, your target, modify the actual achieved. And I'll show you that too once we get into design mode as well. But the answer is yes, you can. So you can see it's suggesting these adjacencies here. Let's clean this up and I'm going to arrange them. And I'm going to go through this process again. This is meant to be, a sort of design hybrid approach here where you can still take all the information and start working with it how you want, right? So these are these overall suggested adjacencies that it wants to suggest here, right? So it's connecting, the lobby with the mailroom for sure. Maybe it wants to be connected with the fitness center and then providing us sort of that loop into some of our units here. So again, just like anything, we don't necessarily have to use this if we want to override it. And we want, the fitness center to be attached or the mailroom to be attached to the retail unit. We could actually turn on something called contact adjacency here. So now if I go in and I just drag this here like this, now it's going to create this adjacency as a suggestion here. So this is one way that you can work from, a sort of inside out approach to study what spaces need to be connected to each other. Another fun thing that you can do that tends to be pretty helpful is actually going in and creating a spatial diagram out of these. So if I go to plan 1, I'm just going to right click this and click update view here. This is going to save my view centered around this. And I'm going to skip ahead just to one quick thing in present mode to show you, what you can do with this. And so in present mode, if I jump over to the views tab here, I've got that plan 1 that I just saved. Now I can pull this in. So this is going to, again, be helpful, and we can clip this in and crop it as we need. But this is going to be helpful for those of you, who are doing designs that do require a little bit more studying of how your spaces are going to lay out, right? So it's going to pull those, it'll show the suggested adjacencies, and I could change the style of this as well. So if I just want like a spatial bubble diagram, I've automatically generated that, pull that into present mode, and now I can add that to a sheet. So that I think is, I'm timing about, 5 minutes on my end to give us our first break here. But that's probably a good introduction to some of the hybrid workflow for how you could go about this in a little bit of like a hand-in-hand method where, you can use the AI features that you want as you need them, as opposed to everything all at once, right? So that's going to be a quick high-level overview of the AI mode. The last thing that I'd like to show you guys just before we get into this, and Alexi, this will answer your question as well, just about editing the program. This is going to be basically like full manual mode. What if I just want to start designing and creating spaces, departments, and programs just from scratch, or being more iterative with it? And so I'll show you how to do that now. And again, first module, we're showing 3 separate workflows, just because I want everyone to feel like they've visualized and seen a workflow that would map well to what they need to start a project. The next modules will go in a little bit deeper into a singular project, singular workflow, and developing that out. So for this one, I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to create one new project to show you basically a manual approach. So we'll go new project here. I'm going to start on a blank canvas and we'll say modeling. And I'm not going to import the site or anything, just because, I've showed you guys that. I don't want to show you the same thing over and over. But for a manual approach, like one thing that you could absolutely start doing is just jump right into program mode here, and start typing in your spaces. So I can actually just dismiss the AI editor if we don't want to use that. And I could go and basically start working with program mode and design mode to build up a program. So if I go back to our design tab here, I can use some of our design tools. I'll give you a little bit more of a comprehensive overview of these tools as we get into it. But for now, I'll draw two spaces, right? I can draw these spaces next to each other, and you can see they're assigned just default spaces. But if I want to start building up that program as I go, on the properties panel on the right side here, I can change both the department and the label. So let's go ahead and create a new department. Let's call this Humanity. And I can add a color if I'd like, but for brevity, I'll just do this. And let's actually assign both of these to amenity here. So now you can see these spaces are assigned to that high level department, and let's make this the mailroom. Use sort of a similar program that we used before, and let's make this the lobby. So now you can see basically I've got this approach where I'm designing these. Again, small little thing within design mode that's really helpful and able to visualize well here. Once these spaces are actually connected, they're going to be conscious of their adjacency to each other. So as that area gets calculated, you're not going to need to worry about updating the program sheet or like Booleaning these out from each other, because it's going to automatically understand how that adjacency and how these spaces are connecting, right? So no overlapping areas there. Always going to be updating this. And you can also go in and you can manually check your areas in this areas panel on the side. And you can view this by several different methods. We'll probably get into a little bit more depth here in the later modules, but again, for orientation purposes. So you can see basically we've got this mailroom and we've got this lobby. If I switch back to my program mode now you can see the mailroom and the lobby are being populated here. The department is set and we've got this data built in. Now what I haven't done is I haven't set any targets for these. And that's just because I'm sort of designing as I go. But again, if I want to override targets or areas or anything, I could go in and say, my net area per room target, I actually want this to be 700 square feet here. And I want the lobby to actually be 900, right? So in this, there's a lot of design fields. I'll zoom in so that we can see this. It's a lot of information here about the spaces that we've just drawn. But you can see basically, okay, we're 4% off of our mailroom and our lobby's 5% off. So those are slightly undersized based on what we've drawn. So this gives you a way to just start manually going in and starting to create that program just by drawing your spaces. Another way that you could do this, is maybe you don't want to go ahead and if we're doing, a multifamily residential project like we have, maybe we don't necessarily want to go in and draw all the 1-bedroom units, right? So I could similarly come in and I'll go on a new line here, just give it one line breathing room, and I'll show you what I mean here. And I could go ahead and let's say 1 BR. I want these units to be 1,000 square feet, and we want 20 of them in our project. Once I give it that information, it's going to add a new department that's just a default department and start creating all these objects. I'm going to rename this department really quick on this space. We'll call it residential. And now it's got a new department and space association. And let's just create 2 bedrooms as well. We want these to be, 1,300. And maybe we only want 12 of them. And so as I create this on this line item, if you create a new program directly under another line item in the programming sheet, it'll add it to that department. If you create if you give it basically a 1 cell space, it'll add it to like a generic. So we could say retail. And we want, 2 1,500 square foot units here. And you'll see that it's adding that default. I could go ahead and rename this again. So now, I've done a lot of these same programming exercise to build up this program manually. And now when I jump back into the design tab, I've got those spaces that I drew, but it's also populating the individual programming spaces that I've just created. So that's one thing that I think is really important just about understanding, again, about just sort of how Snaptrude works as a tool. So it's really meant to link that design with the data, but also not to do it in a way that's overly prescriptive with how you have to use the tool. So this sort of brings me to the conclusion of this first module here. What we really wanted to do is basically explore 3 different ways to kick off this project, so that you guys feel like you have like a starting point for once you use this tool, on your own for your own projects. I can't stress enough how obviously important it is. As being an architect in my background, every project we started would oftentimes start with different information and different approaches that were required. And so the whole point of this, and I hope you guys feel like you have an idea for how you might like to start your specific projects or your individual work using one of these approaches within Snaptrude. So that concludes basically the first module. Hamid, I'm not sure if how you guys typically handle breaks. If we want to do like a 10-minute break, that we can then start going in and working on the next module here. But that would be basically the end of module 1.
Yeah, feel free to take a break whenever you need one.
Okay, cool. Yeah,
We can
I
go
want to
for a
make sure that
5-minute or 10-minute break.
Okay, cool. Yeah, maybe we could take a quick break. I've been trying to just plan in like enough breaks here, so that, obviously everyone can take a moment to basically digest what we've just gone through. And also, if there's desire to model along with me, I'll share the project file that we'll be working off of for module 2, just so that everyone has some access to that. And then you guys could go ahead and copy that on your end. So with that, feel free to take a break. I'm going to turn off my camera really quick, set up a couple things for module 2, and then our team, if you have any questions in the chat, feel free to add those Zoom and we could go ahead and answer those. And I'll go ahead, do probably 5-10-minute break here really quick, and feel free to grab water, coffee, whatever else you guys need. And I'll plan on touching base here in just a second. Okay, I am back from my coffee and water refill, but we'll go ahead and give everyone probably a minute or two more to jump back from bathroom break, drink break, snack break, whatever else it might be. What I'm going to do before we kick this off as well, the next three modules, sort of as I mentioned, are going to be more geared towards developing a sort of single project with a single workflow so that we can get to, a design presentation at the end. And so for the rest of you guys on this call, if you're able to get in, Sophia and Adnan, appreciate you guys adding the link there. If you'd like to go ahead and fill out that type form, that should give you the access to that free month for the pro plan. That'll be helpful once we get to BIM mode specifically, and some of the like detailing out of the site and entourage and things like that there. So if you guys want to fill that type form out, I would definitely encourage that, especially if you're going to be following along with us as we go through the next phases of design. I'm also going to, just because I know that anytime there's a tutorial where you need to follow along, occasionally it can be challenging to sort of keep up to the exact same pace, especially as you're learning a new tool. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to share a link here in the Zoom chat. And if you guys would like to use this link, you can basically go in. It's going to be a view only link, and you could copy the project that I'm going to be starting with into your own workspace. So I'm going to send this link in the chat really quick. What you could do here is go ahead and select if you go up into the project name, it's called Module 2 Project for sharing. Here, I'll just show you how to copy this to your own workspace really quick. So I've got this project open right now and just, as setup for this next module. What you guys could go ahead and do if you want to work on this project or have reference to it for yourself, if you go click on this project dropdown, if you just do save as, you can save this to your own workspace so that you'll have the opportunity to work alongside or just keep it as reference as well. So this is, just a simple AI stack output that we've used. But again, feel free to click that dropdown, save as, and make a copy of it in your workspace. But we might need to do, let's go share. Maybe we can troubleshoot if there's an issue with the link here. Let me confirm one thing with Adnan and Sophia on our end. Have you guys, for those of you who the link hasn't shown up for, have you joined the pro plan just yet? That might be part of it. Okay. Let's see here. Let me try one thing on my end really quick. We'll see if we can troubleshoot this. Again, as everyone starts getting back to their seats, I've showed a project file, trying to figure out if we can copy this to the workspaces if that upgrade's happened yet. Irina, no, you don't have to purchase Pro. We have if there's a Typeform up, and you can move it up to, you could go fill out the Typeform and then you'll have access to Pro, so you can go through everything. So you don't need to purchase Pro to do any of this. Adnan, yeah, let me try, and I accidentally put the project in the wrong organizational structure. So give me a quick second here to move it to the right spot so that you guys all have access to save that model and work from it as well. Sorry about that. That was my bad. Alrighty, Anthony, yes, it will be recorded. So we're just getting set up a project file. I realize I saved it in the wrong spot. So give us a quick second here because I want to make sure that you guys have access to this project if you'd like to follow along with it. And we'll do this, we'll try and do this towards the end of everyone so that, you know, you guys can get an up-to-date file. Okay, we just moved that. I think if you guys want to try and refresh your page really quick, and then try that link and see if that save as pops up there. If not, what we'll have to do is we'll try and troubleshoot, you know, why the save as might not be showing up for some of you. It might just be because some of the plans were recently upgraded there. But if the save as isn't working, yeah, we'll need to refresh here. Let's use this link. Let me share. Because I just moved it to a different workspace. I had it in a private one on accident. So we'll paste this here. Get that sorted. So that'll be the new model. You guys should be able to grab that and hopefully make a copy of it. And if not, I'll try and have Adnan and some of the guys on our team see if they can troubleshoot that and then provide just a message in the channel when that's should be technically available there. Would anyone be able to test and see if they're actually able to copy this project now that we've moved it? Oh, let's see here. File not found. Well, that's fun. I'm going to do one more, and then if not, we'll find another way to share this after. I'm going to just save this as a new project. We'll save it in our PA Academy folder and share with some people. Saying you too. Sorry about this little hang up, guys. Don't want it to take too much longer to build out, but I do want to make sure you guys can access it. Okay. Let's go anyone with the link here. We'll copy this link. And I'll shoot this in there. Adnan, I know you have access to these models as well. If we try that new model, that one should pop up there. And then if anything, we'll be able to troubleshoot on the back end. Cool. Working like magic. Love that. That was my mistake for putting a project in a folder that you guys don't have access to. Sorry about that. So what we'll go ahead and do is I want to start digging into the next module. And so we'll kick this off. I'm going to close all these extra tabs here. And let's go back to our overview because I just want to basically set expectations for what we're going to be working towards and what we're going to be trying to do here. So in module two, this is all going to be about taking that AI stack output, and we're going to just use the full AI stack. And we're going to start refining our design. So the two main, things that we'll be doing is, and I always like to describe this specific workflow as the design the envelope, place the spaces workflow. So what we'll be using specifically from the AI stack with this will be the vertical distribution of the spaces. That's going to heavily inform how we design the envelope here. And then we'll start to basically show you some of the tools that you can use to actually draw it yourselves and create spaces and design concepts. So again, the goal will be to like create a massing concept that we feel confident in, that hits the areas. And then after we have that envelope placed, we'll go ahead and we'll start planning some spaces. This, this process is sometimes, as you're going through, there'll be a little bit more downtime in terms of like me taking up too much of the airwaves. So this will be a really good chance for you guys to start exploring some of this as well. Because I would ultimately really like to get to basically like a fully planned building within the next, 50 minutes, which, is ambitious, but I think we can totally do it. And so in this one, we'll be using our design mode and our program mode to start fine tuning and creating a massing concept that we feel, excited to present or to build as a overall project. So any other of questions that are sort of like less related to the actual module, Adnan and the rest of the team will be able to jump in and start answering those. And so from now, let's go ahead and we'll kick off module 2 here. I've got that project file saved and basically built out. And so what this is this is actually a direct output of the AI stack that we utilized before, right? Oh, you know what? I'm not sharing. That was my bad, you guys. Let's go back really quick here. Cool. Can we see this? So as I was mentioning, module 2, sorry about that. Module 2 is going to be, refining the design. This is our little, project overview. We'll try and get to an output that looks hopefully something like this. We'll design, this building, and we'll be using, designing the envelope, placing the spaces here. So I'm going to jump back into our main project. This is the one that you guys should have access to now. Sorry, that took up a little more time than I had hoped for. What we can see, and I mentioned this a little bit earlier, but we didn't get super into it. We have basically, several object types here that we can work with, right? So we have these department objects, we have these space objects. I am a designer at heart, so I always like to design and explore design iterations here. And so for this specific workflow that we'll be doing, what I'm actually going to do is show you guys how to draw an envelope. And we'll use these department objects to help us like initially set sort of the ground level floor plate sizing. But then I'm actually going to remove all of them from the scene once we have that done. And the reason for that is, in this specific workflow, I care about 2 things, basically. I care about, high design and my ability to use my skills as a designer to create, a convincing output. And then I also care about the actual spaces and the vertical distribution here. So obviously, in order to create a design that's going to work with my program, I need it to be sized directly. So I'm going to start using these department objects as sort of a reference for this design. But then I'll show you sort of how to implement that. So as we're in design mode, I'm going to try and, probably take a little bit longer to model everything just so that I can explain the tools and some of the things, at least the first time I use them, so that how they work and what some of the, the nuances are for them. So with this, what I'm actually going to go ahead and do here is I'm just going to jump into our plan. And I'm going to grab our entire site here. It's always helpful to marquee select because you can move the site and the topo solid separately from each other. And I'm going to use the move tool. That's right up here in your design toolbar. You can also click on move on M for the hotkey for move. I'm just going to move this over here. And we'll have this for reference, just so that we can kind of work as work on the project as a sort of canvas, right? So for now, I'm going to go ahead, and I don't actually need the site context here just yet as I'm designing this. So what I want to do is I'm actually going to click on the site. I'm going to hide it. I can either use hotkey H or I can click on hide here. If I jump back into plan view, so now I can see basically these are the high level departments. These are the spaces. The benefit of utilizing these department objects as a sort of target is they include a pre-baked grossing factor, which I believe is set at 1.4 as the default. So we can actually use these as the sort of target for the envelope that we wanted to create for this building as we're designing it. And then that way, when we go in and start planning these spaces, we'll know that we're also leaving room for like the core and circulation and some of the services themselves. So again, there's a couple ways you could do this. If you preferred designing this way, you could totally just drag all these spaces onto the site and start pushing and pulling them and adjusting and snapping things together. That's totally a valid workflow that you could start doing and to start actually creating a building footprint here. For this, because I want this to also be versatile enough to show you guys, as designers, how you could actually really design some of this and use the AI output within the design. So for this, I'm going to undo this really quick. Let's just put these back. I've got basically all these spaces. This is giving me the high level target. What I want to do is select these 3 spaces. And in the right side, I can see the total footprint area for these spaces. So when I'm drawing a department, we'll try and use this as a rough target, again, because we want to do an entire building in 45 minutes. I'll be a little bit quick. We might not capture everything, but again, I really want to make sure you guys feel like you have the tools to be able to do this yourself, on your own time as well. So that's a 20,000 square foot footprint to incorporate all these spaces with some of the additional amenities or additional services. So I'm going to go ahead and use a line tool. Line tool works in 2 ways. You can just draw and you can close spaces like this, and that'll create a default space that is associated with your program data and has 2D, 3D implications. Or you can also use the line tool in an offset mode. One other thing that we'll touch base on, offset, if you come from SketchUp, works similar to split, but you can control when it splits and when it doesn't. So if you toggle this on, you can split a space, just like I just did, right? If that's toggled off, you can draw over top of spaces. So this is just going to help give you a little bit more control, especially once you start planning this with how you want to go about your space planning. So I'm going to go ahead and use the line tool really quick. I don't want to split anything on overlap right now. I'm going to draw with an offset here. And so this is going to be like a bar type building, as we saw in that little screenshot. So I'm going to use a 60-foot offset. And I think internal, external, just depending on which direction you're drawing on the site. And we'll go ahead and, we want to do an internal. So obviously offsetting the wrong direction here. You can just click on internal on the side and it'll swap that for you. So I'm going to go down and I'm going to make this, we'll say 145 feet as a starting point. And again, this is going to be, think of this portion of the workflow and the module as really based on design iteration. So, this, because we kind of know what we're designing, we can use, fixed dimensions, like we know we have a 70-foot bar here. But, as you're iterating, obviously this process is going to be very iterative for you guys as designers. And so that's where, just using these default spaces to start, like we don't need to worry too much about the program right now because we're trying to understand our massing and the overall concept that we're building here, right? So I'll do one more portion of the bar and we'll try and match that project that we had as our example file. And let's do something like this here. And I think that will feel good, right? So we've got these spaces, they're roughly overlapping here. We could go ahead and if, there's the desire to push pull and start fine tuning, proportions, maybe we want this facade to line up, perfectly with that corner. We could go ahead and, click to do that. And we could start, modifying how this actually looks, from a footprint level and making sure that we can see everything. I can see my video is getting a little shaky here, so I'm going to turn it off really quick. In this scenario specifically, we will be able to go ahead and, in this building, what we could go ahead and do here is all these spaces, and I'm going to use a Boolean union operation. And so basically join all of these spaces together. Wanting to fight me a little bit really quick. Can everyone still see the screen? Okay. There we go. Okay. Sorry about that, guys. Sometimes my Zoom really likes to fight me when I'm screen sharing. I'm not sure what the deal is with that, but we've got basically that floor plate. If you were able to see, I just used the Boolean operation, and just in case that got cut out there, I'll show you again. If I select all these spaces here, there's an option on the right panel here to select any sort of Booleans. So you'll be able to operate on these spaces and join them. I'm just going to click on Boolean union, and now I'm going to create, an entire floor plate for us to model off of. So toggling back into 3D view, we can start to see this floor plate is roughly 22,000 square feet, so tiny bit larger than our overall targets, but that's within the tolerance that I'd be comfortable with initially working in, and then we can fine tune things later. So at this point, with all of the ground level essentially planned, now we know that we can generally fit these spaces within. Our typical floors should be within a pretty close tolerance to this as well, but we'll be able to refine this based on our actual program. So from here, what I want to do is just remove these department spaces. We can kind of disregard them since we're going to use the space first approach and basically plan the spaces within the department. So I will go ahead and just delete these really quick. And that's one of the benefits of having multiple outputs. You don't have to use everything. You use obviously what is beneficial for you as an architect, and what helps you get to your deadline or your output as soon as possible, right? So from here, we've got this as a default space. What I'm actually going to do to just make this process a little bit simple, especially with such a short period of time, is actually turn this into a department object. And we're going to call it just like an envelope. So I can go ahead, you can double click any space in the scene in 2D or 3D, and you can change the space labels. We'll say envelope, or our building envelope. Oops, I just typed that wrong. So we'll call this our envelope. What I'm also going to do is set this to a new department, and we'll just create a new department called envelope. And we'll leave this color for now. We can change some colors later if we like to. So now what you'll see is, we've created a separate object type. And so that means that the areas for our overall envelope are going to be calculated slightly different than the areas for our spaces here. And that is, that's by design so that you can start to, work from multiple different levels of hierarchy. So if we look at our areas analysis panel, this is basically my sort of programming sidekick as I'm going through designing things. So you'll see there's a couple options to view by net internal areas and gross external areas. In this case, net internal areas are basically going to be reporting out the sum of all of these spaces, and gross external areas are going to be representing all of the actual department objects. So this gives us that opportunity to plan the envelope and see the targets as we're designing, right? So one thing that you'll see is, we have 18% achieved. This is going to be representing the initial grossing factor that's set in program mode. And so we could jump in. If there's specific questions on that, we can jump into program mode probably towards the end and just give some more detailed information there. But the whole point here is, we want to basically see this hit, close 95 to 100% achieved here within our massing model. So for this exercise, I generally know how to achieve that and, what I want to do to get there. I'm going to use a command that is called duplicate above to start creating basically a stack of floors. So you can just right click and click duplicate above, or you can use the control and up arrow. When you do control up arrow, that's like my favorite way to do it, because you can start to, really quickly create these massing objects here. So one thing that I will mention about how this works, and let's go ahead in project settings and change this. You can modify department level opacity here, because we're just looking at just departments right now. I'm going to turn this all the way up so we can just visualize this a little better. One thing that's really important to mention here is as we copy objects from level to level, they're going to inherit the building height that's set within our stories panel. So story 1 is 14 feet, 10 feet, 10 feet, 10 feet. As I copy these objects up, they're going to respect that. So there's no need to, necessarily have to change the floor to floor for every single object here. And then the second thing that's worth mentioning is when you do that, when you do that duplicate above command, if you use what's called our push-pull tool or our edit tool, you can click this and you'll see right off the bat that I'm modifying all the floor plates at the same time. So this is really helpful in scenarios like this, where we're just trying to get an early stage massing model sorted out. and check the overall area targets. Like you can see now that just by copying those, we're at 73%. And if you're wondering, there's a different area metric here. 73% is actually taking into account that grossing factor, and I'll show you where that lives just really quick. In program mode, you can specify a grossing factor for circulation or anything along those lines, or efficiency ratio, whatever you prefer to call it. Under that efficiency dropdown in the department area summary, you'll see that's specified at 1.4. So what that number is doing is setting our target for us to design to here. But then we can see this bottom number of say 102%. This is actually measuring against the net area. So it's a small nuance. It's just worth mentioning why these two numbers are different. This one is using the grossing factor as a basis to measure the area. And then this one is actually representing, it's basically like a differentiation between net versus gross spaces. So from here, we'll go ahead and finish out the envelope and try and get us to 100%. I'm going to control up and copy one more level here. And I want to start creating some sort of facade, or not facade, but massing level modulation. So if I go ahead and I right click this object, I'm going to go and make this unique. And so what make unique will give me the opportunity to start modifying this object without modifying all the floors below. So if I jump into, this looks like we're on story 5 here. We jump into the 5th floor. And let's say we want to actually, simplify this floor plate so that, we have just like a small tower portion attached to this. And, maybe there's upper level setback requirements that are causing us to do this, or there's floor plate constraints above a certain height, whatever it might be, right? To modify this, I'm going to go ahead and use the line tool again. And I'm going to click on split space on overlap. Now I'm going to select just this corner to, whoops, I'm going to turn off my off my offset mode. I'm going to go this corner to this corner, and you'll see now that I've basically split this into 2 pieces, and the bottom envelopes are not split as well. I don't need this object anymore, so I'm just going to delete it. And I'm going to start modifying these sort of upper level floor plates here, and we'll add, I think, 3 more floors. So we've got 3 there, and you can see right now we're hitting that 90% achieved, 94% achieved for our targets here. So that's feeling pretty good as far as like our overall design concept goes. One thing that we could start doing if we wanted to, we could certainly go in here and let's take a look at plan 7 here. Yep, that's exactly what we're looking at. We could go in and maybe we want to add a little bit of differentiation to the floor plates. So I'm gonna actually go ahead, I'm gonna just marquee select all of these upper level floor plates. And let's make this a sort of staggered design concept. So to do that, you can just use the marquee select, or you can hold just control and select all these spaces. And I'm gonna use the move tool, and we'll just create like a little bit of visual interest on our massing to start working with and planning. So I'll click anywhere on this edge, and let's just move it like 4 feet to shift it this way. And we'll do another 4-foot offset here. So as I'm doing this, you can see basically we're getting together an initial massing concept and starting to just basically feel out the design on the site. Now, one of the nice things about this is, I'm probably going to want at some point to add some insets here where there's like ground level retail, just to make the ground plane more engaging. But I don't really want to do that until I know where I'm actually putting my retail and all the other spaces within my project, right? So I'll hold off on making those level of massing moves up until I start planning that out. So for now, I'm going to say that, I'm happy with this as a massing concept. And we'll go ahead and we'll start looking at, floor by floor, how we could start planning this and start turning this into, a design based on this vertical stack that our AI stack outputs have given us, right? So let's just go ahead and plan the first floor. And what I'm going to do is just set some simple grid lines that I can reference primarily for circulation, and also looking at how I want to distribute like the ground level uses here. So to do grid lines or any reference lines similar to SketchUp, you can go ahead and click the line tool, and we can actually change from a space object type to a reference line, and we can change the color as well. So I always like to use sort of like a medium-ish gray. And then I'll change the line style to dashed here. And then what I can do, I want just center lines representing all of these sort of main blocks within our massing concept, right? So that's going to be the center line there. To calculate this center line, I'll just draw a sort of intermediary one. And one of the nice things about snaps in Snaptrude, no pun intended, is once I have this referenced, I can always come over here and I can still maintain the link to that reference. So I'll click here, I'll create that reference line. We can leave this in if we want, just to have that as sort of a guiding line. And then let's do one more here. We'll draw this all the way to the midpoint of the other. Got this, and we'll add one here just for symmetry. So we've got, our initial reference lines added here. One thing that I'm probably going to want to do is just start like pulling in some of these spaces and understanding where I might want to put them, right? So we can see on this first floor, we want to program, our AI stack has given us these as our first floor program elements. Totally makes sense that we want to have a lounge, a lobby, and like a mail room, right? And we'll have a couple units on the ground level, but not nearly as much as the typical floor. And obviously retail, we want to be accessible to public, so we'll keep that on the ground level. So what I'm going to do is just grab some of these spaces and start moving them over to the side. And we'll start using this as sort of a method to start planning the spaces, right? I'll pull these down here and let's go move this along this side, right? So at this point, if I wanted to, I could also unhide the site if I want to reference, the site. So one thing that I know, just because, I used to practice in this area, is that this is a really big community park, and this is towards a highway, but still has good views to Puget Sound and all of this. So I think we want to maintain like the overall views this direction, but primary access to the resident lounge or the lobby and the retail, we probably want to keep on this northern side of the project here. So as I'm doing this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start planning some simple, just like circulation and mapping out some of these zones. So this is where I'll jump back into like our line tool, and I'm going to go ahead and just draw first pass at circulation here as a space. I want to maintain this envelope object just as sort of a pure form. So I'm not going to split the space. And I'm going to draw with an offset. We'll see which one I want. I'll do like a 7-foot offset for this. And then let's go ahead and we can use this as a reference line to meet here. So that's feeling good. So I'm just going to kind of plan some circulation and a core for this ground level, because obviously that's the one nuance for how things are going to meet. I'm probably going to break some building code rules as we do this in the interest of time. But we'll go ahead and we'll start drawing this here. And I want to make sure all these spaces can fit, right? So we'll fine tune this a little bit later as we go. But let's say that we want this to be sort of the initial ground level circulation for the private spaces. And then we could go ahead, if we want to add like a core, I'll go ahead, I'll grab the rectangle tool, and we'll just snap from this endpoint to, and we'll turn off our offset. And we'll go here, right? So this is, core sizing, we could rough that out later. But again, we want to really show just the process. So don't correct me if I break some building code rules here. But from here, what I'll do is I'll go ahead and I'll select both of these, and I'm going to try and come in and change these. And I'm just going to change these to the services department here, because this is where we'll handle sort of all of the areas that we that are sort of non-primary spaces. And also just for simplicity, AI Stack gave us, a pretty lengthy name. I just want to call this, building services. We can assign this here and decide what to do with it later. There's, if you'd like to be really organized, we can call this, core and circulation. But you could also leave it as default up until, the end as well. So now we've got this initially planned out. What we want to do next is probably start looking at, okay, like how are we going to incorporate these spaces into the design concept, right? So if I go with our lobby, let's make the lobby on this corner here. A couple of things I could do, I could grab it and drag it in, and I could basically just pull the edges to keep that, 1,500 square feet. Or, I could go into Q is the hotkey for rotate, or you can find rotate up here. And I could just rotate this as well. So this will be, a process of, moving spaces and drawing them in. You can do both, actually. You could come in, and that's actually pretty right on the dot for what we were hoping to target, that 1,500 square feet. You could come in and you could just draw this lobby and entry space and yourself and rename it lobby entry and assign the department, and it would just take this one's place and you could delete it. But when there's like planning exercises like this, it's helpful for me to have a starting point as I'm planning this in, right? So I'm going to pull this mailroom in. One thing that, you can start to do, Eric, yeah, I'll show you how the hallway was drawn really quick as well, just because I need to add another one. So if I do this line tool, I'll click on the offset and I can specify the offset here. And I'm actually going to have some residences on this side. So I'll just click here and I'll offset like this. And, we can fine tune this again. And we'll go ahead and select this and this. And then I will go ahead and click on Boolean union here. And we'll just join these together. So we'll get that circulation. And Gabriel, I see there was an issue with the circulation. One thing too that I will mention that's really helpful about Snaptrude and that is particularly useful for troubleshooting. This chat bubble in the bottom, if there's really specific project questions as you're working things out, you can message this chat bubble too, and that'll be a private chat with one of the architects on our team, like myself or like Adnan, with a couple as well, who are on the call, right? So you're more than welcome to use that feature if you'd like to sort of get into some of the issues or share screenshots as well. But I'm going to go ahead and keep planning this. We've got about like 25 minutes left. I want to make sure we can get to an output that positions us well for the next portion. So here I can do the mail and package room, and maybe this dimension is a little bit weird. On the right side, I can lock the footprint area. One thing is you want to make sure that there's no overlapping vertices here. But as I do this, it'll maintain this. Right now, this works primarily on square and rectangular shapes, just because if you do it on a non-rectangular shape, there's no guarantee that it's going to, there's a lot to compute as far as like what you want for the object to change its size there. So this is really helpful for those square initial planning spaces, right? So we got our mail and package room planned out. Let's go ahead, and because this has like a nice overlook and we're probably going to put a park here later, let's make the resident lounge on this backside. I'm going to just sync it up to this corner. I'm going to use Q to rotate this. And again, this is definitely a really good time if you have the model open on your end for you guys to be able to start modeling as well, because aside from the specific layout that I'm doing, the actual tools that I use will be things that I'm going to be using repeatedly as we go through this planning process, right? So definitely a good chance for you to start exploring and basically testing things out, right? So we got this resident lounge here. We can see that our circulation's overlapping. There's no worries there. We can just go ahead and use the edit tool or hotkey P. We could just drag this edge up, and I'll sync that there. So we got our resident lounge planned. Now let's go ahead and add some of these retail spaces. And I'll show you two different methods for how we can draw that here. So let's drag this one in, and maybe these don't have to be both exactly 4,000 square feet. Maybe one of them can be a little bit larger. So I'll do this. I'm going to use the rotate tool just for this bar specifically, and we'll line it up to this edge here. And let's bring it out and just fill this form here. So I'll do footprint area one more time. I'll lock this, and I'm going to unlock it because we'll make some changes. And let's move this right up here, right? So the other thing that we'll want to do is, as we're planning this space out, like we can certainly place this here, but sometimes it can be a little bit challenging to modify it to fit it up to all the spaces. So for this, what I'll do is I'm just going to create like a general overlap. Actually, I need to make this unique. So one thing here is the other retail units, and I'll show you this so you have a better example, but we'll make this one unique just so that there's no risk of modifying any of the others. So I'll pull this over, and I'm going to oversize this intentionally so that I can show you, how you might want to trim this or make it work a little bit better, right? So in this case, I've got this envelope piece here. It's slightly smaller, and that's probably okay for now. I'm going to jump back to the line tool. I'm going to turn on split the space on overlap, and I'm just going to draw over this singular grid line. Figer. I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right. You can set a lot of that in the initial program spreadsheet. So you'll see that there's some opportunities to change the aspect ratio of the spaces. You can control those for the initial blocks, but you're not going to be able to necessarily control them just yet for like non-rectangular spaces. And again, that's just because there's so many variables with how those would need to shift and the parameters assigned there, right? So we've got these spaces now largely planned out. I want to make sure, especially when you have a ground level use where there's retail mixed with private spaces and, public lobbies, we want to make sure that we can like separate all these uses out, right? So what we can do here is we could say that this is going to be a sort of like back of house area where if we need to drive circulation down for emergency exits or, fire stairs, we could do that here as well. So I'm going to grab the line tool again. I'm going to turn off split space on overlap because I don't want to split the envelope object. And I'm just going to create an outline here. And let's go here. We'll close this loop. So I've just created this default object. For now, I know probably have like 20 minutes left to get through the rest of this module just to keep us on track for time. So I'm going to go ahead and do this one. It's not listed in our program sheet, but we could call this back of house. But we could just say this is going to contain, a lot of those services that we might need on this ground level here. So as we're planning this, we're doing this exercise obviously in 2D, but this has 3D implications here. I'm going to go ahead and start just quickly laying out some of these units on this level as well. And so one thing that I'll do, because this level is going to be different than our typical floor plates, I don't want to accidentally edit all of the 2-bedroom units that we have in our project. So I'm going to select all of these really quick. And I'm going to click on Make Unique on this side, just so that I can have this specific floor with a little bit of different requirements here, right? So let's go ahead and just start, really quickly placing some of these. We have our 2-bedroom unit. We'll try and keep that around 1,000. Let's do something like this. We'll sync it up to this line. Once I grab it on this line, I can also push it past this. So if we want to, modify that, we can start pushing and pulling here and start doing this planning exercise as well. So then I'll come in, let's add a 1-bedroom unit and we can do the same thing. And actually what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to create 2 1-bedroom units. I'm going to split them. So I can use the split tool as sort of a hack to doing this. I don't want these to both be the exact same size. So I'll grab the middle and I can split. And now we've got that 1-bedroom unit, 1-bedroom unit. And let's go ahead and put a simple studio over here. We'll try and keep that around 550. That'll be perfect. And then the last one we'll plan will be a 1-bedroom, and that'll fit really nicely right there. So basically, we've just planned the first floor of this building, and we can go in our 3D view, and we can basically see now that this is starting to get planned out. I'll go ahead and I'll turn this opacity down a little bit so we can see, right? So as I'm adding these spaces, when I turn the opacity down, you'll see the envelope is just sequentially getting filled with spaces. So from here, let's go ahead and start cranking through a couple of the upper levels just to get them planned and set up really well for sort of the next phase of our design. So from here, I'm going to jump into our second floor plan, and I'm also going to hide the site right now because we don't necessarily need to see that right now. I'm going to jump into our second floor plan, and we can go ahead and start planning these spaces. So same deal, same exact approach. We'll pick sort of where we want everything to be located, and then we'll base it off of that. So I want to bring the core up 1 level so we can modify that core for a typical floor plate. So I'll go in, I'm going to select the core here, and let's right click and do duplicate above. Now we'll see this in our second floor plan. And right away, I already know that I'm going to be doing some modifications to this core. So I'm going to right click and do Make Unique. Now, as far as like process itself goes, I am going to come in here and start redrawing the circulation aligned to the center of these reference lines here. So I'll jump into the line tool, and this will also give us a chance to create a little bit of an elevator lobby. So I'll use that same 7-foot offset. And yes, I'll save out a version of this file to that same workspace and then share it again so you guys can have this for the next version as well. So let's go ahead and do a center line here. And we could go and draw this, and you'll see we're just going to create basically a quick circulation path. And let's do something like this. And if we want to, we could even double back on this and just create some circulation over on the side. I'll press enter here. So now I've got this basically built in. And you know what I did? I forgot to turn off my split space. So I'm going to redo that. This is one thing that, we'll want to take into account. I didn't want to split the space. I wanted to keep that envelope object solid. So I'm just going to redraw this really quick. Press enter. So now we have this. So now you can see basically we're cutting through our core here, and that's fine because maybe the elevators only occupy this side of it. I'm going to select the core, and I'm going to select the circulation object here. And I'm going to go ahead and click on trim. And so now I've split this core object with the circulation running through. so that we can have, an elevator lobby that gives access to the rest of the units here. And we can make this a little bit wider if the elevator entry and exit is going to be over here for that lobby, right? The last thing I'll do before we actually start adding some of these units is I'll just add some circulation to this side as well. And we can select both of these, and let's do a Boolean union, and we could assign these our circulation again. So as we start doing this, we can start planning these spaces, and parts of this core, we could extend, and depending on where the walls are, we could extend this out if we really wanted to, just to accommodate for that space there. So now that we've got high level circulation, let's go ahead and just really quickly start planning some of these spaces out. So we'll do the fitness center and the co-working lounge first. So I'm going to put those over in this corner of the building, basically just like this. And let's shrink these down. I think we have around 2,500 square feet. So let's bring it over here. So we can use that push-pull tool. Again, really nice that it respects that core and the circulation. So we don't have to trim anything, and it's just really easy to start modifying there. Next, I'll do the fitness center. We could do the same thing as that retail space down on the lower level. We'll just lock this to the corner here. I'll use Q to rotate, and we'll get this planned out. And now we've got 2,500. Let's go ahead and do something like this. We can shrink it up a little bit. And that looks about good for us for this specific process. Last, I'll use my push-pull tool, and we'll get this placed here. So we've got like a, sort of awkward space here. If we want to, I can just come in, and since I know this is obviously can't be a unit, we could save this for later for something else, but I'm just going to identify this space and draw a circle around it. Once I complete the loop here, it'll create that default space. I'll reassign this. We'll just say services. We can just call this storage for now, and then we can fine tune later. So now we know the rest of this floor plate that we want to plan is dedicated to these units, and we can see if we can fit some more on here. So we'll grab the 3-bedroom units here, and we'll start placing it just directly on the canvas. And then let's go ahead and start. Let's do something like this. We'll line it to this edge and then grab it. I want to make this unique so I can customize it a little bit better. So we'll get this 3-bedroom that was around 1,300. That's looking good. Again, I do want to go do this process a little bit quick so that you don't see me tweaking the design too much, and it is more about actually the process, right? So we'll do this, and we'll sync this up here. And then again, let's do the same little hack that we did with the 1-bedroom units, because this looks to be about the size of 2. So we can start planning this out. Obviously, if you have like really specific modules that you're working with, you could absolutely use those modules here to start like really, intensely massaging the form and the spaces themselves to creating these, right? So we've got our 1-bedrooms planned. Those are pretty close to our overall target. And now maybe what we could do is we could copy a studio over to this side. So I'll go through this planning exercise. Definitely a good opportunity as I'm sort of just going through this, a little bit more of a repetitive process here, to ask any questions and to start doing some of this modeling yourself as you're sort of planning, and feel free to obviously experiment with, how you want to design this and how you want to handle some of the forms there. So now we've got, these studio units, and the really nice thing about this too is once we have this in place, right, like these 1-bedrooms, we could copy them. And so we've got, a couple object options here for how we go about and plan this, right? So we could go ahead and we could just directly grab all these 1-bedrooms and just continue dragging them on, or we could copy the ones that we know are already refined to the spaces that we want. So again, I want to be quick and efficient with this portion, just so that we get to a really sort of refined output for us to take a look at. So we've got this corner space here. I'll go ahead, I'll add like a 2-bedroom unit here, and we'll customize this with Make Unique because it's got a pretty unique condition. And I think we wanted to hit around 1,000 square feet, which is fine. And let's do something like this. And I'll show you how we can start to hack this a little bit. So I'll use the line tool here, and we'll split this space. I'll draw from this corner, and we'll just split across like this. I'll separate this. I don't need this anymore. Now I'm planning this 2-bedroom out, and that's actually pretty close to the target that we wanted initially. So we can start moving that around, changing the size of that as well, right? So 2-bedroom unit planned. Now we can go ahead and let's just keep cranking on some of these. So let's add some 1-bedrooms. Plan, we'll use Q to rotate. And because we sized them all, they're going to fit really nicely. I don't have to, since this is all rotated, maybe I don't want to, rotate every single object from here on out. I could simply go ahead and just delete these, and I could just copy this one, right? So if I use that copy tool, I could go ahead and copy this here. I could also come over on this side and I can copy here. A nice thing that you can also do is you can copy as an array. So this is something new. If I use the copy tool, copy from this point to this point, I can now specify 4 of these. Maybe we don't want 4, maybe we want 3. But the benefit of this is as I do this, I can come in and I can change this later. So if I say, actually, I only want 3 or I want 4, I can change that in the array settings in the object properties panel on the right side here. So definitely going to be helpful there. And next thing, we could do is we've got basically a 2-bedroom that we could go ahead and add in here. And let's go ahead and rotate this. And maybe this could be a larger 2-bedroom unit. We'll sort of see how it's looking once we get it resized. So I'll size this over here. Yeah, it'll be a little bit of a different shaped unit, but it's roughly the size we're looking for, right? So in this case too, there's a couple options that I could do here, right? I could use my push-pull tool to bring this circulation down on this side. And then I could just simply bring this 2-bedroom unit. Whoops, let's make this unique here. I could drag this up over here. So I'm getting that accounted for basically. And now I've basically got, this floor plate is almost planned out with the exception of this purple zone. So I'm going to copy these over to this side and let's just make a 1-bedroom unit that's a little bit larger. I'll make this unique. And let's go ahead and draw this. Use the line tool to split this. Cool. So now we've got our second floor planned. The next, with each floor that we have that has more and more typical spaces, the benefit too is obviously that, and we actually placed that manually, so we don't need that one anymore. The benefit too of this is that we can start copying objects and repeating a lot of the objects from floor to floor here, right? So if we go to 3D, we've got 2 more typical floors that we want to start planning. So I'm going to jump into our second floor plan, and we want to basically copy all this up and just add units where we have the fitness center and the other co-working lounge. So I'll go ahead and I'll just go ahead and select everything here. We'll grab that whole array. And I'm doing it this way just because I don't prefer to just have them all manually selected instead of filtering. So now I can go ahead, I'm going to duplicate these above, and this will probably take, now that we have this planned, a much shorter period of time to plan this. So we know that we want to generally have the larger units on the end caps here. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to copy this like such. And then I'm going to go ahead and right click and do flip Z. Oops, not flip Z. I meant to do flip X. So I'll flip X axis here and I'll go ahead and I'll plan this 3-bedroom unit out. And we'll make sure that we don't modify the other one on accident. Yep, we're good there. So I'll go ahead and I'll plan this 3-bedroom out. And, maybe this 3-bedroom, since this is a smaller space, we can come in here and expand this, and we'll fit the 2-bedroom just perfectly into this space here. So we've got that planned, we've got access to both of these units now through the circulation. I won't have time to go add emergency stairs or exits here, but that's something we definitely want to be considering as we're doing this. And then the last thing, I will go ahead and this 2-bedroom unit just feels a little awkward to me. So I'm going to actually use this same setup here, and I'm going to extend this hallway a little bit. So because I know this is associated with the floor below, if I click make unique here, I can now edit this freely without modifying the floor underneath. You'll know too that you're editing an instance object, which has, repeating instances that'll be modified. Once you drag this edge, you'll see that it gives it that green highlight there. So that green highlight indicates you're not just changing that single unit. So for this, let's go ahead and use a 3-bedroom unit and a 2-bedroom unit, and we'll move this here. And let's use a rotate to plan it. Again, we've got those tolerances synced up nicely. I'm going to do something a little bit different on this one. I'm going to actually place this down here, and let's move this up. And then for this one, let's line this edge here, and we'll let this 3-bedroom unit come around the side. So the ends of the building are always going to be a little bit different, but now we have our typical floor plate for our 3rd floor plan here. And we could go ahead and we could see we've only got one more floor to plan. So under plan 3, what we could do is just select all these. There's an envelope object underneath this, so I don't want to copy the envelope object. So I'm just going to go use our select dropdown and do filter selection. I'm going to select the departments, and I'm just going to hide that really quick so that I can marquee select all of this now. And I'll use control to grab this. So now I'll duplicate this last one above. And that'll plan our 4th floor plate here. And then from here, the only thing left that we really need to do is actually get into these upper level floor plates. So this will be a little bit easier for us to go about. On the 4th floor now, we could basically just ignore all of this, and let's come in and grab this, and we'll grab all of these objects and we'll trim them, right? We don't want that. So I'll do duplicate above one more time here. Now I'll jump to the 5th floor plan. And you'll see now that this is a little bit offset because I did, the super fun shifting. We probably won't actually shift the core itself, but we'll, for the purpose of this exercise and to be, quick, we will go ahead and just select these objects and we'll move them to line with that staggered shift. And then, as we get further into DD, we'll answer the challenge of the offset core later. So I've got this placed, right? Obviously, I don't want this hallway just sort of floating around, right? So I'm going to jump back into the 5th floor plan here, and I'm going to use the line tool, and I'm going to split this circulation. And it's fine that this is offset for now because we've got that little bit of an elevator lobby there. So I'm going to split this circulation. I'm going to delete this. And if we want to, that obviously, as long as we have room for our elevators, we can flex, the sort of interior demising walls here. So I'll make this one unique because I know it's associated with the floor below and I don't want to have any of those changes. I'll just expand this here, right? So this will give me the opportunity to just quickly plan out this typical floor. So I've got this basically set up. I've got all the units that I want. I'll come in here and we'll grab everything. And we could basically just go ahead now with these selected. We could just finish out the planning of the building. I think we do if we go check our programming on this side. And part of the reason why we stopped referencing this throughout the design process is we like to design in typical floors to make things more efficient and easier to design with lots of stacking units. So at some point you can start to transition all of the AI stack output into your manual outputs. But I do know just from the program that there's one more thing that we want to incorporate, and that's going to be like a rooftop terrace. So I'll drag this over here and we can basically see this is roughly the size of all these units. So we'll remove these from our stack here. Excuse me. And let's go ahead and do something like this, and we'll resize this as we need. I'll go ahead and I'll grab this circulation again, because this is associated with the level below. I'm going to make this unique. I'm going to push and pull this. We've got some overlapping spaces shown there. And actually, let's do something like that. And then we'll draw that. Cool. So now basically what we've done is we've got basically the whole setup pretty much planned. We can unhide everything and we can take a look at basically the model as a whole. And you know what? This object height is not correct. So I copied this without the height locked, just for reference. This lock icon will lock it to the story height. So the rooftop, if we check our stories panel, is about 11 feet. So I'll lock this area to our, oops, not the flipper arrow. We'll lock it to the height, and then you'll see this is going to get locked in. But I do need to do one other modification here. So let's go ahead. I need to make this unique just so that it's synced to our correct height. I'll click lock again. Now we've got that built in. So that, once we get, this whole exercise done, and I do recognize that I sort of sprinted through this whole building design, but again, a lot of the tools that I use are just, repeating processes as we go, right? So a final thing before we jump into the break, I can see now that I've got basically, different programmatic uses on the exterior of the building. And maybe I want to start modifying these faces. So I'm going to just add some ground level insets here to these objects. And so let's actually go ahead and at this point, we'll hide the envelopes. So we'll go to filter selection and we'll click on departments here. And I'm actually going to hide these, and we'll probably actually not need to use them for the next module. And so what I'll do is I'm just going to go ahead and push pull and add some, ground level insets so we can make this a little bit more, pedestrian friendly. So I'll use the push pull tool. I'll just use like a 4-foot inset just to make things quick and easy. And we could go ahead and do something like this, 4, and we could push this back 2 to 4. So as I'm doing this, I want to be, pretty quick and efficient here. Let's go ahead and make this unique. And start pushing that. 4, 4. We'll do 4 here. And let's do, oops, I locked this footprint area. I need to unlock that. And I'll push pull this 4. So now we've got, sort of an interesting massing concept that we could start working with, and maybe we want to make some changes to this later. But as far as, the overall design goes, this is probably a good place for us to take a break before we jump into the next module. Again, the whole point of this was really looking at, okay, so now we have an AI stack. What happens, if we want to be taking a really, heavy design approach and creating this, right? So throughout this, we've taken that program that's been established by AI stack, we've implemented it into a design that, is, done by us, the designers. And now the next step will be taking this to an additional level of detail. So that will be module 3. And yes, I will, as soon as we go on that break, I'll do another 10-minute break if that's cool with the guys at PA Academy. And I'll save this model out, I'll add it to that workspace, and then I'll share a link with everyone. Again, sorry I had to turn off my camera. Sometimes I have to wrestle with Zoom as I go. But hopefully, this feels valuable. Feel free to ask any questions in the chat during the break. I'm going to go refill some of my coffee and water, and then I will plan on heading back in about 10 minutes. So I appreciate everyone for hanging around and sort of watching, this process. It's been fun to share with y'all. Okay. I think we can probably get started here again in just a second. Again, appreciate all the guys on the Snaptrude team helping answer the questions as they come through. It's super helpful. As far as this goes, we'll give probably 1 more minute for people to get back from their break. I did share a link to a project file just above. That's the project I'll be working from, and we'll do about 60 more seconds here to let everyone join back up, and then I'll start screen sharing again and we'll get going. Actually, I'll screen share now just so we can get our module overview shared here. So let's go ahead and do this. Cool. All right, I'm going to give about 1 more minute and then we'll jump right back into it. Alrighty, cool. Well, it's been about 10 minutes. I'd like to try and get us over to the next module. Hamid, how are we doing on time? We're doing okay? We're probably just over halfway through by this point, but I want to make sure that cadence is good and that we're on time for everything. If you're back from break, yeah.
Yeah, all good. And even if you needed a bit more time, feel free to go a bit over time, no worries.
Okay, cool. Yeah, well, I'll make sure that I don't want to drag things on if we don't need to, but I also want to make sure we can cover all the stuff that gets you guys the tools you need. Again, this is less about creating a specific project and more about trying to walk you through a project in a way that gives you confidence to use this tool in your own practice, your own work, right? So what we can do is, it looks like there might have been a save issue with sharing. Let's try and see. Adnan, thanks for troubleshooting that. That one is saved into the correct folder, so we might just be able to fix that over on the back end if there is any sort of individual issues there. What we can do now is we'll just kick off right into module 3, and as everyone gets that model saved up further in the chat, we can go ahead and just do like the quick overview, right? So for this point in the project, we're going to be doing, it's going to be BIM mode focused, but we'll also be doing a couple things in design mode just because that's how we draw and that's how we initiate a lot of space creation here. So for this, we'll be doing primarily 2 things. Like, we want to add some more detail to our design concept. We'll probably add just a really simple like facade screening system. It won't be anything fancy or super pretty, but the idea being that we can show the process for how you could start to do that. And then what I also want to do is just show you in BIM mode, if you do work at a firm who does eventually need to take projects into Revit, about the sketch to BIM feature. I want to show you what that can do as far as turning your geometry into basically Revit ready models, right? So we could go ahead and like kick in on that side of things, and we'll be focusing on a lot on the building design, but then the other half of module 3 is actually about adding more details to the scene and the entourage. And I tend to like to do this for 2 reasons. It's one thing to see a massing concept just sort of in blocky form, but I think that there's a sort of art to being able to embed it in the site and to add some simple context and just visualize it, especially with people on the site, like what that scale looks like. So we'll add just basically some simple context in terms of like outlining some landscapes, trees, and people, just to help make it feel like we're not designing some super, refined building on top of a really generic site. So to do that, we'll do some site modifications. And I think I tend to like to take things into detail sequentially. So we'll probably start with adding the detail to the scene, and then we'll shift over to designing some of the facade and the overall concept there. So if that sounds good with everyone, what I will do is shift over to my other screen. I'm going to keep cranking until my video yells at me if it does decide to yell at me again. And we'll jump over here. So this is a model that I've shared with everyone in the chat. Hopefully you can save the project and work with it and view it at the very minimum. And what you'll see here and what I've done just in the time that we have, I wanted to pull that envelope object out here just so that you have this, as a reference object. You can always move it off to the side. It's not going to affect the areas or anything just because this envelope object is contributing to our gross area targets, whereas this is contributing to our net, right? So we have the ability to sort of filter that slightly differently here and get an idea for, how those spaces start lining out. And so for the duration of this module, we're going to be focusing on all of the spaces that we've just designed and starting to bring that level of detail up. But we'll leave this for a reference if I don't know, maybe we'll decide we want to use it in present mode when we put together a presentation. And let's go ahead and work on, hopefully we'll get the file permissions saved there on the back end because it should be allowable for everyone. And if not, we can make sure to share those resources with the team. So let's go ahead and start planning this out. So the first thing that, I typically like to do when I'm deciding, okay, now I want to add more detail and start, just visualizing this as a design concept. We can jump into some of our view settings. View settings is this panel right here. You'll see this line bar. I can select view settings and I can change, canvas color if I want to, but I can change the view mode, right? So I can switch into a textured view mode, which will remove that department level coloring from our objects. Or I could do like a simple monochrome mode. I always like to work in texture mode because this unlocks the ability a little bit later to actually use like a paint bucket tool in BIM mode to start painting on, additional colors and details for the just sort of high level visualizations. So with that, we'll shift into our textured mode. And I would like to start integrating this site a lot better with our terrain because, there's quite a bit of grade change here. So the first thing that I'll do is I'm going to select the topo solid. When you select the topo solid, you'll have the opportunity to click on something called set datum. And set datum, what it's going to do is wherever I click on the topo solid is going to bring the entire topo solid's level or the point that I'm selected up to ground level. So for example, if I select just like middle of the site right here, you'll see that it's getting brought up to this point so that we have an intersection there. Because we're in, such early stage of design, oftentimes, you might have a survey, you might not have a survey, but this becomes as a great way to, really initially study that without, having to go through a really intense, topo solid process. So we'll leave this here for now, and I'll show you how we can start to integrate this more. But what I want to do for this output specifically is actually create a sort of terraced site. The community that we're designing this in is called Yesler Terrace. And so by nature, you see a lot of these sort of park sweeping forms and terraces that overlook into the Puget Sound, which is, interestingly, directly across from the highway here. But to do that, we'll go ahead and jump into our plan view. And we'll start splitting some of the site here. So I'm going to grab the arc tool. And with the arc tool, I want to make sure that split on overlap is selected, and I'm going to check the site object here. So what this does, if you were to start, full manual, you could actually just draw site objects like this yourself if you wanted to create those. So, for example, I could draw this rectangle here, and that populates as a site object. So just so you're aware that that does exist. But for this, we're going to use the arc tool here, and I just want to basically trim some of the edges up and create some like bulbs for the road and the access here. So we'll clean this up a little bit. Basically what I'm planning on doing here is having this sort of like sweeping terrace form. So I'll click here and let's go ahead and come down here. And I think we'll do something like this. Actually, let me do one thing here. Let's do, yeah, we'll do this. Sorry, I'm having designer indecision. So we can do something like this, right? As I do this, what you'll see is now the site is split into two separate components here. So if we want I do this sort of interesting kind of terraced form, I can combine this action with one here, and we could go ahead and move this here. And I think my camera might be giving me some issues again, so I'll fix that here in a second. So I'll go ahead and I'll line this up, to create this site split. I'm going to turn my camera off so that I don't have any streaming issues again. Yep, thank you for that. I just noticed that as well. So I'm going to for that. Normally it's a little bit of a challenge. What is, I'm just going to go in and just for visual purposes, I want to trim some of the edges here. So I'm going to use the corners just so that as we visualize this later on in AI rendering, it looks a little bit nicer, right? So I can go ahead, I can have this here. We'll trim right there, delete that object. And then I'll just do this for a couple more areas on the site here. Let's do something like this. We could create a little bulb here. Since there's this nice little walkway that'll go up through the park, start really populating this with some more detail. So you can get, as detailed as you want with this. This is honestly, it's an optional step, but do this just because I think that it really helps with the presentations. We have the opportunity to, sync the model from a data standpoint. Oh, screen's frozen. Let's see. Thank you for bringing that up. Let me stop sharing and then reshare. Okay, sorry about that, guys. I will reshare the screen here. And let me know if this is back for you guys. Okay, perfect. I am sorry about that. What I was explaining here, maybe I'll just, not fight with my camera anymore here. But what I was doing basically is I was just using the arc tool to add just some simple curves to the corners of the site here, right? So adding this to add just a little bit of padding, make it a little bit more visually interesting, and start making the site just feel a little bit more embedded within the context. Again, this is also going to look really good in a diagram view. So if I jump into 3D, we'll see that this is split now. What I can do here, I can actually go ahead and move this entire site object. I want to move it down because I do want to create a sort of terraced form here. So I can select this site object here. And from here, what I'll go ahead and do is I'll actually jump in and I'll move this down to the story below. So in the properties panel, you can see there's an option to move objects. You can do this with anything. I can click this drop down. I just want to move this to story -1, so below grade. And then for this one, we'll probably use like an interstitial area. So I'm going to use the move tool. I'm going to click from this vertex here. And if you use the up arrow on your keyboard, this will lock it to the vertical axis. So you're moving vertically. I'm just going to move this down like 5 feet there. And so now I've got this sort of rough, initial terrace form here on all of my site objects themselves here. Might add a little bit of depth to these. And then what I can do from here, now that I've got the datum set on this side of the model, I can go ahead and I can click on cut and fill. What cut and fill is going to do is give me the opportunity to select all of these objects and perform a cut and fill operation that adds them to the site. So for this, we'll keep it simple. We'll just do 90-90. Again, there will be more regrading that has to happen, because of these roads here. So, we'll polish this, later on in the design iteration process, right? So what we can do from here, we've got this all, drawn out. Things are looking nice. I want to go ahead and start adding some, details to the site to just make this feel a little bit more alive and less like a 3D model and like a sort of believable environment that we're creating. So to do that, what I can do here is I can switch into BIM mode, and this is where it'll be helpful if you filled out that type form so you can access some of this. I'm going to switch into BIM mode, and I'm going to go to, I'll draw this in 2D, but then we'll modify it in 3D. I'm actually also going to hide our entire site object. Click it, select H to hide it. And I'm going to use the arc tool again. And I just want to draw like a simple sort of retaining wall that we can use here. So in BIM mode, now when I use the draw tool, I'm not drawing spaces anymore. I'm drawing BIM objects here. So this is definitely helpful. We're just going to do a generic wall. And I want to say that, if this is going to be a retaining wall, you can do, we'll just do a foot. So as I do this, what you'll notice is I can draw, from center line, which is going to be fine for now. And I'll just come over here and I'll draw on this corner. And I'll just sync this line up to the edge that we've drawn here. So we'll zoom in and get that line nice and polished. Okay, I'll center here. And so I'm just getting this drawn in just from a landscaping perspective for the renderings and the visualization. I did want to split it because I know that terrace is here. So I'll just draw this, finish this one out really quick. We'll lock that to this edge. And then let's do one more. We'll do this right over here. And we could go ahead and drop it right there, press enter. So now we've got basically those walls drawn in. If we jump into 3D, they're not going to be synced to the right levels, and that's totally fine for now. We just wanted to get them in as objects because we mostly want to reference them. So for these two objects, we could move them down again to story -1. We'll sync them to that level here. And I want to actually reduce the height of this so that it's not too tall so that we can have this sort of terrace form showing up here. So let's go ahead and we can modify the height through this object properties panel. Or, if I'm sort of roughing things out, obviously, eventually we would hire like a landscape designer to come in and do all this. So I would just come in and, for architecture's sake, and selling the vision, I'd just modify it with the push-pull tool. I'll also move this one down. Let's just move it actually down to our story -1 as well. So now we've got this in place. One thing that's nice and helpful, especially with this sort of part of design where we're not really like designing a full BIM project yet. We're still trying to sort out a lot of the design and sort of how we handle things. So that's where the tools like the materials bucket can be really helpful because this gives us an opportunity to come in and start adding just like really simple materiality, almost similar to SketchUp. So you can add your own in, or you can reference one here. If we wanted this, retaining wall to be darker, there is a match tool. I'll show you that. So I can select this. We could change this to a darker color, or if I wanted to use the eyedropper tool, I could select the eyedropper tool. I could select this and then paint this color as well. So we could add that, as our retaining walls. Match tool for wall height, not necessarily for wall height. The closest thing would be linking your spaces to the actual height of the floor to floor levels. So if you click that lock icon on a space object, it'll lock it to floor height. But not like any sort of connect to ceiling just yet because we're still associated really early on with those space objects, right? So from here now, what I could go ahead and do is I want to start adding some detail to the site and making some simple, entourage and things like that. So I'm going to jump into the site plan here and let's see if we can offset this. So I'm going to do like a simple offset here on one side, and I'll show you sort of how this will work. So we'll do it on this object, but the offset tool, I can offset the site as a individual space. So if I wanted to create, a sort of different parks type thing over here, we could say 12-foot offset here. Now what I could do, these are just brought into the 3D view as default spaces, right? Which are, not exactly what we want. We have something called smart tags here. So if I double click this and I type in ground, what you'll see is this will basically remove it from the program table and add a grass texture to this and reduce the height. So we can do the same here. Add that to ground. And now you'll see, we're actually getting to a point where we're able to start planning this department, or excuse me, start planning this site out a little bit more. And then finally, one thing that we could do is we could make a plaza that sort of is for the residents and associates with the spaces as well. So I'll jump into our site plan here. And maybe what we could do on this one is we could create an offset object here. Maybe we'll have it come in like 6 feet or something, 7 feet. Oops, not 70. We'll do 7. That's fine. And then what we can do here, is we could just use that trim tool again. So if I jump into the line tool and I switch back to design mode, I'll click on spaces because this is drawn as a space object. What I just wanted to use this offset edge to sort of derive a plaza shape, right? So I'll go into site plan here. I'll select my space and I do want to have this split. So I'll go here, I'll click this, and I'm just going to outline this like plaza that we've been building in so that we can start to modify and make, a little bit more of a unique space. So I've got this, entire plaza that's built in here. I'm also going to start carving out just some, initial spaces on this ground level to make some, interesting plazas on the backside as well. So we'll do one here. And literally all I'm doing right now is just splitting the spaces as we need them. So I'll project that here. Split, split, split. And we'll say that there's sort of this, plaza that runs through the whole datum of the building, and we can add some sidewalks and some fun things a little bit later. Let's actually, maybe we want to keep this. So I'm kind of compartmentalizing a lot of the work here just by splitting this object, because for landscaping, I want to be really quick with this process. I'm not trying to do landscape design, but I'm trying to build it up to a point where it's believable and something that, we'd be excited to present to clients, right? So from this point, I'm going to go ahead. I don't actually think that I really need the rest of this object here. So I could, remove this if I wanted to, right? And so now what I can do is I can start operating on some of these default spaces to like help them sync up to the plan a little bit better. So for this one, I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to do this in 3D so you can sort of see the effect of this. I'm going to call this Plaza. And similarly, this will drop the height down as well to lower that down to the ground level. And for this one, we're going to do a plaza with a courtyard. So I'll use the offset tool. I'll offset, 6 feet in here. And for this one, I'll double click and I'll say plaza. And then for this one, I'll double click and I'll say ground. So that I'm starting to just build a sort of convincing pedestrian level. I'm going to do the exact same process on this side. And let's do 6 feet. And we'll say plaza. Plaza is one of those, it's a hotkey that we have. You could rename this to whatever it is you want and change the height manually as well. I just like to work with it because it's really quick and works, pretty seamlessly. So, and I'll change this one to ground as a hotkey. Grab a drink. So now what you can see is, we're starting to plan this out. It's nothing fancy, but it's starting to work for our design concept and starting to create like a believable concept that we could then pull into our renderings and our entourage, right? So, and because the ability with our AI inspirations and present mode is really strong, we're giving the more sort of rough detail we add here, the more we're actually able to extract from those AI renderings. So that's why I always like to do this for a practical level, but also like personally, I tend to get more excited about my design project when I see it being integrated with the site and having a more realistic context, right? So I'm going to keep doing this just for a tiny bit here. We could come in and maybe we want this plaza to sync up a little bit better. So I can push and pull the edge here. Let's do this. We could line it up with this inset. So maybe we want to have some access here. Or actually, maybe this side, because that's a mail and package room, we don't need access. We could let that be green. And we could do something like this where, let's let this be green as well. We can start pulling this in. And so now we're starting to, connect the plaza with the design concept that we have. I'm really starting to make it feel, polished. One thing that I forgot to do that I think I did want to do was actually inset this space as well. So because that's, part of my design logic for this was the shared spaces and retail spaces I want to be inset. I'm going to go ahead and unlock this footprint area. And this is going to be a nice area to sort of inset as well, because it'll be associated with the resident lounge. So we'll do 4 feet here, help our design a little bit. Do another 4 feet. Cool. So I'll jump into plan. Maybe we'll add, a simple curved sidewalk. Probably won't spend a whole bunch of time getting it designed out, but what we could do here is let's continue this. I'll draw something along these lines. And let's try and decide how we want to best draw this. We'll make this like a simple bulb. So I'm just basically drawing some simple landscaping elements to help with the detail at this point. And let's just do something like this. I'll switch back to the line tool. The nice thing is as you're closing these loops, you can go from line tool to arc tool as you're switching. So you can definitely create some different forms there. And let's close this off and let's call this plaza. And then I'll connect these two plazas with like a walkway. I can use the arc tool again. Instead of splitting the space, I will do an external offset. So we want like a 10-foot walkway here. And we can sort of experiment at this point. I'll switch the offset here. So we can start experimenting with basically like how we want this to, blend with the site. But again, not like spending a whole lot of time thinking about exactly what this is. I just want to basically create something that, that feels cohesive and appropriate for the community that we're designing in, right? So I can come in here now. I'll just use push-pull tool, and I'm going to draw a space here to connect this. We'll use freeform. And I'll use the erase tool, and we'll join that edge here. And then I will go ahead and use the arc tool on this one. Actually, let's go ahead and do it a little bit differently. Let's subtract from this. We'll do it after. I'm going to draw an arc tool here. Sorry, sometimes I like to figure out design as I go. And as such, sometimes I got to work things out on the call. So we'll do this here. We'll separate this out, and then I'll split this object here, just so that we can have it sync up nicely. We'll do that. Okay. So now we've got this in place. What I'm going to do is go ahead and grab all these objects here, and I'm going to change them to a plaza again. So now I've got this plaza set. If I go into 3D, I can see, whoops, got that one accidentally there. We'll call that plaza. So now I've got this set up, and it's getting there to a point where it's getting embedded in the site. What I'd like to do now is basically add a little bit of entourage. And so for this, I'm going to add some trees and people. And I'll show you just some personal preferences, with trees and how we can start to do that. Once we get that done, I'll jump back to the design. We'll do a little bit of, experimentation for a facade. It'll be really simple because I know we could spend, 4 hours alone designing facades. So we'll keep that simple. But from here, I'm going to jump back into BIM mode here. And on this panel on the right side, this is basically going to be like all of the object settings that you have access to. So if I want to start adding some people and trees to make the scene a little bit more lively, I'm going to jump to the furniture tab, and you'll see that there's landscape objects built in by default here. So I want to start using probably some like evergreen type trees. And since we had the first level plan selected previously, we can start modifying those here. So as a start, I'm going to add just one of these, and let's find another one that we like to use. Let's add this guy here. And I'll show you, one of the sort of Snaptrude tips and tricks that I always like using. We tend to implement these sort of 2D trees just to help with like overall project performance and all. But when I'm doing a lot of like AI renderings and saving out different views, I like these trees to have a little bit more depth. So what I do is I use the copy tool, and I kind of create a pseudo object for myself really quick. So I'll copy this, and then I'll use Q to rotate, and I'll just rotate it about 90 degrees here, right? So once I rotate that, I'll move this object back. We'll move it over here, and we'll just, add it at an intersection to 90 degrees to this tree. And this will also help to show you guys how the grouping feature works. So I can control to select both of these, and then I can right click and I can group. So now I've got this object, that looks better as we're rolling around in 3D. It is also going to help with our AI rendering views as well. So I'm going to do the same for this one. And let's do this. I'll use Q. And then let's move this here. And then let's do the same. I'll group these. And then from here, I can do one of my favorite processes within Snaptrude, and just in general, it's just like adding all this context, right? So I'll use my copy tool, hotkey C. I'll grab this, and I can start just adding, landscape around the area, because I want to make this design feel convincing and, exciting to whoever we're presenting to. So let's add some over on this side, and we'll focus on just this upper level first, and then we can switch to the lower levels. So we'll add one over here and just add, some really simple details. We do too. And then let's do some on this side by the plaza. So I've got these placed on the first level, and now we can go, and I'll just copy some of these. Again, times like this when I'm doing some stuff that's like, repetitive, absolutely, feel free. It's a good time to ask questions, or to, start modeling some of these as well. Just as you go about and sort of experiment with the feature set. And we'll add a few more to this. I'll do one over here. Maybe we want to have some along this sidewalk here. Okay. Cool. So we've got those set. Last thing I'll do is I'm probably going to want to move some down. So I'll just grab 2 of these. I'll copy them over here, and let's move them vertically as well. Actually, we already moved them down. So this one looks like it moved not correctly. So if I grab it, any move, I can, use up arrow to toggle that. So I can line this up with the site. I think I've copy just snapped to a lower level here. And now I can start, copying some of these objects as well. So I'm not going to be too scientific with this. Again, I want to really just add it in for, the renderings and the context here. I'll copy this one over here. And let's get that placed on that side. And we'll do one more or 2 more. Cool. So now we got those placed. Next thing I want to do before we get into, detailing out, some facade, let's add some people to the scene here. I'll jump into furniture. I can use people. Again, this is no science whatsoever. It is really all about just, starting to place some on the site. Again, adding this does end up helping with a lot of the AI renderings, especially because it gives it a sense of scale. And can start to, implement these within the scene a little bit better. So we'll add a couple more, people objects here. We can reuse them as we go. I'll say something like that feels good. Now we can come around to the other side, and we can start populating this plot right here, doing the same exact method. So we'll add a couple people. And, repeats, again, won't matter as much, just because AI rendering can pick up and iterate over them. Basically make all of these guys unique as we place them in the scene. So let's do a couple more. Cool. So now that's our main plaza level. What I'll do is maybe we'll leave this one out for now, just for speed. Jump to our first floor plan, and I'll switch to the furniture again and start adding some people to this as well. And then this will be pretty much the last step, before we get into exploring some ideas for, the design as well. So, and this one, this site object, maybe for this specifically, we want to use the paint bucket tool and actually make this, a concrete pattern, because we have a sort of outline here. So I could go ahead, I could, pick one of these concrete textures. Let's just do smooth concrete, and I could paint over this whole object, right? So now we're getting this nice and detailed out. I feel like, things are good. I could spend probably way too long detailing these, just because it's fun and exciting for me to start visualizing projects this way. But what I'll go ahead and do next is start actually looking at, what's it look like to start planning some simple facades on this design. So in order to do that, within BIM mode, if I use the line tool again, I've got the opportunity to draw just masses. Now at this point in time, for any sort of designed facade that we want to do, I can draw with an offset, or I can just draw simple masses. But what I'm going to do is basically create like an instanced mass that I can start copying around to the facades. So for my high level design concept, I'll probably say, all these external faces here, and these internal faces, basically the long faces of the massing facade, are going to have this facade treatment added to them. And then the ends will sort of just be, we'll just use like a clear curtain wall in our AI inspirations for this. So I'll go ahead and switch to the line tool here. I'm going to draw with an offset. We'll just start planning this on here. We've got, our design relies on 3 floor bundles, basically. So we can start to use that to our advantage to create these multi-height panels. So if I do this, I've got that offset. I don't want 1'7". Maybe I want this to be like 8 inches. And let's say we want this, to be roughly 15 feet. I'll press enter here. And again, this is definitely going to be more of like a free-form modeling experience that you'll have. So we can jump in. I can use push-pull tool here and then move this vertically as well. And I can start to basically size these up and move them, right? So if I want this to, leave the corner open, I'll start putting this in 5 feet. again, consider this, highly exploratory at this phase, right? So there's not going to be a very specific, like you have to do this, this, or this. We're exploring how we could further this design through the facade. So once I have this panel made, I could go ahead and I can use something that we haven't touched yet called split face. And so split face is going to basically let me actually split individual spaces of this. And so if I want to have this sort of like angular pattern here, I could go ahead and I could click this as such. So once I do this, I'll be able to use a push-pull tool, and I can start pushing inwards, and we'll say we want to go like 4 inches. And now I've got, this initial panel that's created here, and we can start adding some materials to it as well. So from here, if I go select this, I could go ahead and click on materials panel. Sorry, there's a Saturday morning kid who's getting in trouble in the background. Hopefully you can't hear that. So if I click on mild steel here, I can actually paint this whole object here. So I can select this and paint over this object. And then I could go ahead and I could use, a different texture for this individual face. So I painted the whole object, use materials. Let's go ahead and use like a wood texture here, a cedar, and we'll apply this to the face itself. So I can click here and now I can apply this to the face. And then I can really quickly start to go in and start copying this and creating, a really simple facade system based off of an array. So I'll use the copy tool once again, and we'll copy this. We'll say, maybe we want to do like, we'll start at, 22 feet, for example. And we can adjust this later. Whoops, I actually meant to show you one thing. So instead of just doing one panel, I'm going to copy multiple panels. So we'll say 22. And then if I use tab over, I can tab over to the quantity. Let's say we want 6 panels here, and I'll press enter for now. So what this do is it'll just create that array. But again, we could go modify this array as we need. So I can remove this to 5 panels, or I could say, I want this to be 24 foot, whoops, not 14, 24 foot spacing. Because my typing is all over. And we can start to customize this to, our facade and how we want. So because we want to leave the corners open, let's just keep it at like 22. Let's do 23, there we go. So that's starting to feel nice, as a method that we can do. And then I can start to move this and, center it on the object as well. I don't want to spend, again, with most things, I want to show you how to do things, but I also want to do it in a way that's, quick enough that doesn't, get me caught up making too much detail. So for this, we could say that this is feeling good as a sort of facade level concept. Now that we've got this built, we could also just copy this over to some of the other spaces in our project, right? So for example, if I wanted to copy this over, I could go ahead and I could use this endpoint. I could copy it over to this side here. Let's just project on that red axis. Oops, there we go. And as I copy this, I've got this whole array. Since it's, facing a different direction, I'll right click. And I think I want to do flip X here. Nope, I do not. I always forget which one I want to do. I'll do flip Z. And so now we can get this, on both sides here. And I can customize each of them individually, or, adjust the heights of any individual panel. And we'll see that being reflected here as well, right? So if we wanted to have a little bit of offset there, we could do that. If not, we could just leave it synced up for now. So what I'll do from here is, now that, we have a pretty standard width for our facades in the entire project, I am going to copy both of these down to this lower facade. And we can just customize it a little bit for the lower facade, and we'll copy it over to this angled bar as well. And that'll bring us pretty close to the end of this module. So I'll grab from this endpoint here. We're going to copy both of these down vertically, and we'll use this, and that'll feel kind of good to us there. We've got this panel on this side. Obviously, we don't want panels overlapping here. So what we'll do as, part of this exercise is, if this is feeling good, I'm actually going to go ahead and ungroup this, because I don't want these panels to, hang down unnecessarily over this plaza level. So I'll come up and I'll make both of these unique individually. And I will go ahead and I'll just use push-pull tool. And I'll start moving this vertically as well. Nora's asking about UVW maps. Less with UVW mapping, but you can upload your own materials. So if you were to go ahead and use the add material panel, you could add this material as a, any sort of texture file. And then once you have that loaded in, you do have the ability to update basically the scale of that material that you're uploading. So that's certainly something that you can do as far as adding your own materials with a seamless texture. So again, we've shortened that facade panel. I'm not personally, maybe not the biggest fan of this facade, but I hope, this at least gets the idea across for how you could start to go about this and using some of the tools that we have. So let's go ahead. It looks like there's some panels in here that we don't really want to have included. So I'm just going to right click and isolate this temporarily. And I will ungroup this. And I'm just going to go ahead and delete these two panels that are overlapping with our spaces. I'm going to unhide this. So now we've got that. And it looks like there's actually one more. Yeah, we want to delete that one too. So now I've got this, this, quadrant bar of the building, however you want to call it. And let's go ahead and just quickly add another facade to this side of the building. And then I'll get into sort of where we could go from here as far as, some of the BIM tools that we have available to us. So I'll go ahead and I'll select this one and I'll select this one. And let's copy this from the corner of the building. And actually what I'll do is I'll copy this from this object and we'll manually move them as we need to fit. So I'll move this here. And with these both selected, I'm going to use Q as a rotate. I'll rotate here. We'll go to this edge and then we'll just align it here to that edge, right? So really quick and easy way to sort of get this built in. One thing too, because this is an array, I can go ahead and add another object here to map it up better to the width. And I'm also going to move this so that I leave this corner area sort of exposed as well. So again, really quick edits to communicate the sort of idea, right, before solidifying a really specific, hard to edit object. So I definitely like to use this for pretty heavy design exploration here. So now we can see we've got these, laid out here. Let's add another one to this array. And maybe we want to remove these objects here. So for this, I'll right click. I'm going to isolate this once again. I'll do ungroup. And let's do these 3 objects here. And I can unhide that. And so now, I'm getting to a point where I'm starting to get some simple facades placed and some, high level concepts added to this scene. Maybe the last thing, that we want to do before we get into any sort of like intense BIM mode edits or anything along those lines is if we want to add like a mechanical screen to the roof, we could definitely do that. I always like to do something like that just with a simple massing object. So if we use a rectangular tool as a mass, we could change this from a facade element to just a generic mass here. I will go ahead and actually I'll show you how to do it with a space object. So we'll use a space object here and I'll just drag from corner to corner here. And there's no height set, right? So we don't need to worry about this as much. Let's set this height to 5 feet. And then we'll use the offset tool to actually create like just an inset mechanical screen about 15 feet in. So this will just be, something to add just one more level of detail. I'll do one probably for this. I'll use the line tool on this one and just create that outline here. Okay, and I'll do the same exact thing. We'll say 15. Delete. We want this to be, we'll remove this. We'll unlink that to the fuller floor height. I'll go ahead and say 6 here. And then last thing, maybe we're in Seattle in a really sort of progressive neighborhood where there's lots of sustainability. Maybe we want to add like a simple green roof. So I could go ahead and I'll do this again. And let's go to, I think this is on story 5. Let's go to the 5th floor. And using same setup, let's just draw like a quick outline here. We want to make sure we're not splitting the space again. Go here. And so now we've got this, and let's do the offset. Let's do like a 5-foot offset for this. And I will remove this. And again, so much of this is just about sequencing how you use the tools and sort of, what your goals are, right? So because of this, I'm trying to create a simple roof and I want to communicate that. I don't want to spend too much time thinking about it. I'm just going to say ground. And so I'll add that, as a material option here. So as we go through, we can start to really refine the design And we can even get into, you know, BIM mode. There's a couple options that I'll explain. And get into sort of where we can go from here, right? Because if we're at a point now where, you know, we might actually want to start taking this output into present mode for the next module, and start creating like a simple presentation with, you know, our plans and some, you know, generic views. We could absolutely start doing that, but there's two ways to do it. And so I want to do like a little bit of a branch here, because I think that this will be helpful to just see, you know, where you can go. So after you get to this level of detail, I typically like to evaluate like what I'm trying to do, right? So if I'm trying to sell the vision and the overall concept of the design, I'm typically not going to be converting this whole object to a BIM object just yet. I'll be either adding material to these masses, like by painting it on, and starting to use that as just like a visual communicator, or and basically rendering over that in present mode. Or if I'm at a point where, you know, my design team has buy-off or the client has buy-off, or we know basically this is the direction that we want to move in, and now it's time to get into Revit, that's when I'll start to explore some of these sketch to BIM. And I say this because this is sort of an important point where, you know, sketch to BIM will convert this entire model from these, you know, highly editable spaces to basically like a semi-fixed BIM model that is meant to go into Revit or to be translated for extra you know, geometry translation. So like one thing that we could start to do here, and then to show you how that works, is if we click on Sketch to BIM and jump over to the right panel, you'll see that we have basically the opportunity to specify all the wall types. So for generic walls for this, you know, we could use just like a glass curtain. We could start customizing all these as we need. And what is going to happen is I'll click on Sketch to BIM here. And what that's going to do is it's actually going to convert all of these to BIM objects. So I'll do this really quick and just show you, but then I'll probably Control Z before we go into present mode. So we'll do this really quick. And so now you can see what's happened is we've taken all those spaces that we've planned. It knows what the interior walls and what the exterior walls are, and it's appropriately adjusted those as we need. So now we've got basically this realistic building. I didn't specify the mechanical screen materiality, so that transferred a little bit differently, but we can come in and we can change that as we need it. But again, the really important thing is once this process happens, now all of these objects, if we look at them, they're BIM objects. And this is important because when you do eventually transfer this to Revit for, you know, DD or CD or, you know, whatever phase it is, you'll be able to transfer this as all native Revit family elements so that you don't necessarily have to go redraw everything. So this is really helpful and really powerful when it does come time to add that next level of detail or, you know, design documentation to be able to transfer this. And so there's a couple ways to do this, and we probably won't get into that on this call, but there's a lot of documentation. We do have a Snaptrude Revit plugin that will let you actually import a Snaptrude model from Snaptrude directly into Revit so that you could basically pick up the work and start from there. And then, you know, if we jump into our plans, you know, we can see that we've added these walls, and we can, you know, if we decide to start adding additional detail. Again, if I switch the view here from texture to department, I can also retain those, department level colors that we've assigned. So that's, you know, BIM mode from a high level. For our cases, I will probably want to keep these massing objects as flexible as possible so I can really modify things with that push-pull tool and refine the areas, and basically solidify the design. So that is, you know, a high-level overview, I would say, of basically how you can start to translate these design concepts, you know, from these space objects to adding more detail, building up the scene a little bit more, and starting to create, you know, a design that's a little bit more believable, right? So we can grab the materials bucket here. And since we're going to go into present mode from here, a couple things we could do, like we could start painting on materials if we wanted to. Like maybe I know that I want this, you know, rooftop to be a like darker material for this mechanical screen. So I could change, you know, the entire screen to this darker object again. And similarly, I could come in and I could start changing just high level colors of the scene. So if I wanted to do like a glass or a frosted glass, I can change to face and I could start painting that on these faces as well. So this is all just, you know, personal styling preference, like how you would go about this. We'll be using AI render to start prompting a lot of things over this. and start getting it basically ready for rendering and presentation and starting to build some outputs here. So I want to make sure, guys on PA Academy, do we have, how much more time do we have for the next module? Hamid, I just want to confirm our timing. Are we good for, okay, 40 minutes? That is perfect. We'll take, I think, a quick 5-minute break here. I'll share this model with everyone in the scene, and we'll make sure that everyone has that if they had access issues. I want to do just probably a quick 5-minute break, and then I'll jump right back into it. We'll spend the last 30 minutes here going in and creating a presentation out of these sheets. So let's do that quick. I realize I went probably a little bit long on this session. But yeah, let's go 5 minutes. I'll start a timer now, and I'll be right back, and I'll share that model with y'all. Okay, so that is about a quick little 5-minute break. Want to do a little bit of a shorter one just because, the next module is a really fun one to get into. And I think you guys will like seeing, how you can be creative in sort of new ways with iterating over your design. So I've gone ahead, I've shared a model link in the group chat here. And if it's okay with everyone, I will plan on kicking back off and sharing my screen. So let me go click on share and we'll just go over our overview really quick. And again, this presentation will, I think we should be able to get through most of it within the time that we have. So if we can confirm the screen is visible, what I am going to do is, cool, love that. I'm going to turn my video off just because I know that we've gotten a couple freezes for whatever reason whenever my camera's on. But we're going to go over our module 4. This one's pretty simple. It's going to be all geared around creating views of our model and looking at some of the design settings there. And then it's also going to be looking at how we can add those views to sheets themselves. And additionally, how we can start to iterate over the views that we have with our AI inspiration. So the goal that we will be trying to get to is actually like a polished sort of design presentation that we can then use to go ahead and basically share our design concept. Feel free to reference that model. I'm going to jump over to that model now. One thing that you'll notice is the design is, recently completed. If you jump into present mode here, what you will see is I've also added just some general inspiration images to present mode. So that way, if you want to follow along, like step by step, you've got access to that as well. So most of this actual module will be focused present mode, but there's a couple things that we're going to want to do in design mode in terms of setting up our views so that we can basically show the exact objects and geometry and design set styles that we want to show. So for this, the first thing that I'm going to show you guys how to do that we haven't really got into is actually looking at basically how you could go ahead and start saving out your views. So for this, we want to start looking at, for this presentation, I think we'll include like 2 hero shots and a sort of diagrammatic view of the scene, right? So what I could go ahead and do to do that is in my 3D view mode, I've got a couple options here. I can swap between textured and department because we're doing the hero shots right now. I want to keep that in textured. So I'm going to go back. If you'd like to, you can toggle off the axes if you want, if you don't need to see those axes at all. And so we'll do that, just clean up the view a little bit. I also, I don't necessarily need these envelope objects anymore for at least for this exercise. So I'm just going to remove them from the scene just to keep everything nice and clean. And what I'll do is I'm just going to go set a view. So I like this, as a sort of conceptual image. So let's go ahead and, start creating views. We'll base it something like that, right? So once I have a view that I like, I can toggle into my view mode over here on the side. And then you'll see that at the very bottom, there's an option for 3D views here. If I click this plus button, that's going to save a 3D view. So I can call this, I can rename it and we'll call this, hero A. And then maybe we want to have, another one that shows this plaza and a little bit more of a close up. So let's go over here and do something like this, right? And, we can fine tune these as we go, but let's go save this view and call this, we'll call this vignette. And then I think, the last view that we could go ahead and start creating before we start pulling information into present mode, the last 3D view that is, let's go do like a simple aerial perspective with department level turned on. So I'll go ahead and I'll change this to department view mode. One thing that, you'll notice off the bat is these department colors, they're defaulted to a specific color per se, but we can go ahead and we can customize all the colors as we want. So for this, this is helpful if you have brand standards or like an overall theme that you're trying to achieve within the design. In this case, yeah, here, let me grab, I think there's a module link up ahead, but we'll share all of the other module links again for everyone who's asking in the chat. So if I want to change these just for better visualization, I can actually do that from program mode. So I'm going to go up in program mode here. And what you'll see is you'll be given the option to change the department level color here, right? So the four that we want to change are services, retail, residential, and amenity. So you could pick space on whatever hex code you prefer. For this purpose, I have some that I had saved out, so you don't have to go through choosing any specific hex colors for that. Let's go over here. Oops, let's paste this here. And it looks like my color code is not wanting to change really quick. Well, we don't need to spend too much time on this if it's being fussy with us, but let's see that. There we go. So we changed the retail. We've got that sort of tan. Let's do a teal for this residential. There we go. And maybe we want to do the amenity. Let's do that like an orange color. So this is helpful, especially, if you have like brand standards, you can just paste those hex codes here for you. So we've got, a color scheme that feels, pretty consistent. Services, those were wanting to give us some fuss, but these honestly probably don't need to be any sort of crazy color because it's not a major program element, right? At least from what we're trying to call out. So if we go into our design mode, now you can see, we've got this color coded based on those hex codes. You can always adjust them as well. Like if you don't like this, you can click on the object, and then the department options, you can change the color. You can paste the hex codes there as well. So if you wanted to make it like less saturated, we could start moving that over on this side, and maybe that's starting to feel a little bit better, right? But the whole thing that we really want to do here is create like a diagram that illustrates the programmatic uses for this specific view. So for this one, I'm going to go ahead and I'll go, save a view that sort of like an overview like this. You could do a perspective or you could do an orthographic. For this one, I'm going to choose to do a perspective view just because I think it'll look nice in the rendering style that we're going to use. And then I'm also going to go ahead and select my topo solid and turn the fade up for this one so that when I pull that in, the sort of hierarchy that your eye is drawn to is based on our space itself. So from here, we'll rename this, save it and rename it. And let's just say this program diagram. So now with all these saved, I can toggle back, and as I change view settings, the color mode will change as well. So we can leave these in textured and this in our diagram view. And then similarly, let's go check our floor plans and just hide things as we need to make them better and more visible here. So like if we want to come in on the ground level, we could start creating views of the ground level and the overall site. For this one, I might want to just hide this just for simplicity here. And also these trees they're showing in 2D. So let's go actually filter by selection and grab any furniture. And so one thing that I'm doing here is I'm going in, and I need to just filter by selection in BIM mode, excuse me. I'm going in and I just want to hide any of the BIM specific objects because with just spaces in the scene, it gives us the opportunity to have a little bit more customization with our scene and what we can do. And I'll show you what I mean in a sec. So I'm going to hide those really quick. And we'll utilize this for this ground level view. And for plan one, I could do a couple things. I could, override it. For this, I want to just create a new plan view and say diagram site plan. Oops, I spelled that wrong, but we'll fix it. And then let's go grab maybe a typical floor plate and then the roof. So let's do this one here. And I'm going to create another view for this guy. And let's call this typical. We'll do typical plan, and then let's go do like just the roof level. And I'll create one more. And again, we've got, roughly 20 minutes left. So I want to be quick enough to be able to show all this. So let's call this roof or top floor, whatever you want to call it, right? So now we've got basically 3 views saved. We've got 3 plans. We could go ahead and we could start pulling these into our design. And maybe we want to actually hide these in the view. I'm going to do that and update this view here. You can always update a view if you make changes. Yeah, honey, we'll try and figure out. I think I made the mistake of sharing to the wrong team initially, which caused some issues. So we'll share all those files after, so you have access to everyone as we go through. So now, with all these saved and the high-level overview of what we want here, let's go jump into present mode and actually start creating some sheets. So in present mode, what I'm going to do is start building out and getting just the content that we want to modify in the scene, right? So we got all these inspiration images down here that you can pull in from anywhere on the web. But now we'll go ahead and let's just drag in our site view, typical plan, and a roof plan. And so one thing that that we could do as we pull this in, excuse me, is we can start to modify the size of everything. So I'm going to change the scale of this. You can always change the scale. To do 1 to 20 here to just scale them up a little bit. And then from here, maybe the site plan, we actually want to do a little bit smaller than 120. We can do the others at 120. We'll do 130 for this. We can modify the label sizes as well. So we can change those to regular label sizes. But one of the things that's really helpful when you do this, and as I mentioned, when you have all space objects and BIM objects just turned off, you'll have the opportunity to come in here and actually change how this view is styled, right? So if I come in and I zoom in, I've got all of our labels. I can delete any labels that I don't want or that are redundant or don't go towards telling the story that I'm looking for. But I can go ahead and select this, and there's a couple options for style. So we've got block style, but I can also click on rounded corners if I want this to be much more of like a diagrammatic view. Or again, if you're in that really early stage of space planning, we're not going to want to do this for now, but just so you know it exists, I could do a bubble diagram. But for this, I like the rounded corners as like a conceptual breakdown of the mass. Now I'm going to go change this to a 120 scale as well, just for our sheets, because that'll fit. I'm going to double click and just adjust the boundaries of this. And so again, I'm just creating the content over here. And let's go ahead and modify this size. Yeah, I think Adnan or Archit might be still on here. Adnan, if you might be able to take a look into the 2 of those things with the modules there and the sharing. I'm going to swap this over to a 1 to 20 view here. And we can go ahead and we can do rounded corners on this one as well. So I'll trim this. So now basically what we're doing is, we're adding all of the stuff that we want to add for our sheets. And in the last, in the last like 18 minutes here, we'll just spend time, creating a couple of these sheets and actually, fine tuning things, right? So I've got all the content that I want as far as like the plans go. Now let's pull in some, yes, you'll be able to adjust the sheet size. I'll show you that in just a sec. So we're going to get all the content in and then we'll start doing the sheets next. So let's pull our hero shots in our program view. And we can come in and we'll be able to start modifying these as we need. But I'll just house these over on this side here, right? So what we could do is start building out just like a very simple template for our sheets. So from here, I'll go into our sheets and I'm just going to add a new sheet in addition to these 2 auto-generated sheets. I'll click on new sheet here. And to answer the initial question, if you click this, you can specify the print size, the orientation, and if you want margins on it, I'll just turn these off for simplicity. So as I do this, I've got sort of an initial idea for how I want to style this and like the overall theme. So I'm just going to go ahead and start building some of that out here. So I'll place this. I've got this simple grid texture where our design concept is going to be geared around like the Pacific Northwest. So I'm going to just add this cool grid texture in as a background that we can start to trace over. As I add this in, I could also go ahead in the top right corner, I can adjust the opacity of this. So if I don't want it to be as strong and just sort of a subtle texture in the background, I can do that. And then the other nice thing that I could do now is I can right click this and I can just lock this, right? So if I go to edit and toggle locked, That'll give me the opportunity to lock this. So now I'm not going to modify it, and I've got this as an underlay. I try and keep it, really simple with some of the tools. So I want to have this sort of angular style here. So I'm going to use the rectangle tool, and I'm going to select this like hatch pattern with an infill, and I can choose sort of the texture on the line widths as well, right? So I'm going to do this, and I'll draw this here, right? And I'm going to use this as sort of like a secondary organizer on the canvas. So I can do this, and I'll turn the opacity down a little bit just to create this sort of minimal layering system to say. And then I can just rotate this basically 90 degrees. And I'll say this is sort of the overall template that I want to start using for my sheets and for my overall design concept. So once we have this initial sheet placed, I could go ahead and I can start adding, think of this exactly like Moreau, right? I could go ahead and I can start creating text notes here. So if I come in, I can start saying, we'll say MFR design concept, and we can change the font. A couple initial font options as well that we can change to. We'll change this to like a medium size. And then let's go and just create like a quick title block for this whole project. So let's call this, do extra large on this. So we'll say this is going to be called 123 Wrestler Terrace. And I'm a little bit of a font junkie, so I'm going to use bold and italics to call it out a little bit. And then we'll add just a simple line here just to differentiate and create some hierarchy. So let's do a solid line, medium, and we'll draw this. So I'm starting to get all this drawn into place. I can start organizing. Again, this isn't like something that we need to spend too much time on, but just so you know that you can start building out those like high level formats here for your design concept, right? So we'll take this in, and we can start adding some stuff in to the scenes. But first, what I want to do is show you guys how to iterate over all of our imagery in our AI inspiration mode, so that you can start to like create a really clear visual cohesion over this. So one of the awesome things about this, and I mentioned this a little bit, is we can start to prompt over these images. So I have one, pasted in just so that you don't have to watch me doing any sort of like prompt testing. But as I do this, you can enter a prompt here. We're going to use Nano Banana for this. And I can paste this in. This is prompt I'm using: recreate this fully photorealistic scene with details added and materials. And let's actually go ahead and say, make the gray areas of the building curtain a sleek curtain wall. And then we're just giving it, building design, yes, or terrace, Seattle, Washington. So I'll do this, and this is, really my favorite way to iterate over things and start to kind of design from a really high level, right? So I'll send this prompt in, and usually within just like a couple seconds, it's going to give us an output here. And so like I've ideated for this one, it's going to be super stylized. We're going to use like watercolor, but just in 2 seconds and a prompt, we've got a really convincing early rendering. If we don't like the patterns on the curtain system, we could go ahead and reprompt this as many times as we want with the same prompt until we get outputs that we'd like, which is something that's you could spend multiple hours doing, just playing and iterating with this. But I just want to show how you can go about this, right? So we've got one, 2 versions of this. One of them's a little bit more moody. One of them's a little bit less moody. And so we could go ahead and we could start iterating over these in several different ways. One thing it looks like is some of the colors got brought over in this view, and we actually don't want to have those colors here. So if I jump back into design mode, I'm going to go update that one view, this hero A or vignette here. So I'm going to go and click view settings. I'm going to click update view. And as I make changes, I can update all these views as needed. So I could jump back into present mode now. And if I click this and go to views, update view, we'll pull that in, and hopefully we'll fix that little overlap. Yep, so that blue area is gone. So now, one thing that I like to do just as like a best practice in terms of like workflow, I always like to paste. I always like to paste all of the prompts that I use into a note over on the side, right? So we can add this over on the side, and this is just helpful for, if you have a style that you like to use. This is very large text, but we'll change it to smaller. And we have that prompt saved. as a way to iterate for future views or for future versions, so we can keep that consistent. So then I can go in and I can copy this prompt over. And let's say we want to go use it on this view. So I'll do the same thing, and we'll render it here. And then we'll start to pull in, additional information. I actually like to do a couple different things. So what I'm going to do for this one specifically is I'm actually going to go in and render these, really cool realistic views. But for our concept presentation, the theme that I'm rolling with is going to be like a sort of watercolor inspired view. So I'm going to do like a little bit of jumping. I'm going to add a bunch of detail here to this, and then I'm going to pull back with a prompt to convert the scene to watercolor. So I'm going to say in this scenario that I actually prefer this one just because I like the overall mood of it a little bit better. And I'm going to give it a prompt to, let's go recreate as a messy architectural watercolor style with pencil line work, right? So I'll do this. I'm going to run this on this one. I'm going to get a couple prompts running at the same time here. I'm going to run it on this guy. And let's go ahead. Since this is a diagram view, we don't need to convert it to a realistic view. So I'll prompt directly from here. So now you can see we're starting to convert these into these cool sort of watercolor views that we can use in our design presentation. If you have a preference, you could absolutely save whichever preference you have here. And so if we go in, we can see that singular prompt has given us some really cool outputs as far as like the scene goes and what we're looking at here. So these are ultimately what I'm going to start using in our presentation. And I'll pull these up just so I have access to them. Finally, what I want to do is I want to do the same thing for our context inspiration. So this is one of the really fun parts of the canvas is you don't just have access to render over views you've created, you can render over views you've pulled in from the internet. So I've got Pike's Place Market, Seattle, basically all the stuff that I want to, capture the essence of the place that we're designing in. And I'm going to prompt all these at the same time here. So you can see now we're basically just creating a really cohesive sort of design system that we can start placing things into, right? So getting all these outputs here, and then we can start using these to go ahead and build out our presentation. So what we'll go ahead and do is start adding these to our sheet, start building out, our presentation and starting to paste some stuff in. So this should take probably, I think, 10 minutes to speed through this whole design concept. So let's go drag this in and create, our initial sheet here. Obviously, we could fine tune this a lot more as a design concept, but again, want to make sure that, I get you guys to an interesting place in a timely manner, right? So we've got this, 1, 2, 3, Yesler. We could say this is going to be our cover sheet. You can always go ahead and add some more information later. Now, what I'm going to go ahead and do is just copy this and paste this. Now I'm going to rename this. We'll just call this 1, 2, 3, Yesler Terrace. And let's call this overview. And let's go change the styling there. And now instead of this image in the scene, let's pull this off and delete this. And let's pull in this high level sort of diagram view. So I can always click into this and start modifying, the crop region so that we can show only the information that we want to see in the scene. And then one of the awesome things about this too is I could actually go back to our program mode really quick, and I'll show you that. And within program mode, I'm going to go ahead and actually select all of these. And I'm going to just change the font here. I think we want Courier. Yeah, this kind of matches the font we're using. So I'm going to select all these in program mode, and I can just do Control C, go back into present mode here, and I'm going to do Control V. So now I'm basically able to pull in, that programming sheet. And the nice thing, again, about the program sheet being color-coded with the design sheet, is that all of this information is, easily accessible. So I'm able to really quickly put together that legend. We could fine tune this, a lot more as we figure out the overall design concept, but want to kind of get to some, finished presentation outputs here. So the next view that I'm going to create is I'm going to copy and paste this one again. Let's do just like our project inspiration. So this is where we can pull this in. So we could say inspired by the, and let's call this, inspired by the Pacific Northwest. And let's go remove the rest. And then from here, we can start taking in some other views. So maybe we want to roll in this view into the scene And I want this to be a little bit more dynamic as a scene, right? So I'm going to go ahead, let's rotate this 90 or rotate it. I think that's about 30, right? And just start creating just like a really cool sort of diagrammatic overview of basically what our project is inspired by, right? So this is where we'll pull in all of these views for our inspiration. And similarly, what I'm going to do is I want to make sure that this is mapped to the same height here. And then we're going to go ahead and we're just going to trim these and make them really thin. So we're going to have almost like vignettes of the environment that we're trying to capture with our design concept. So Seattle, we'll use the Space Needle. I'll double click into this and we'll trim this one up. We could, sync these up to be the exact same size, but for this purpose, we don't need to be exact. And I will swap this one. We want to capture some of the coast over here. Just look at these trees. And we can pull this over off to the side, right? So again, one of the really nice things about, the AI rendering and the AI inspiration is being able to create previously it's one thing to have brand standards, but every project is going to have sort of a different look and feel that you're trying to communicate here. And so being able to create that prompt that gets you to that look and feel that you're hoping for is something that, I didn't really have a lot of a chance to experience in my professional career because all of that had to be done, manually. Now with this process, we can create these sort of super stylized outputs and use them as, inspiration. So I'm going to go ahead, right click, and let's group these objects and we can just pull them into the scene here. And let's just make this a really cool view. And we could shrink this up, right? So the whole idea being, that we're able to start coming in and, creating, hey, this is what our design inspiration is based off of. We could start adding more detail. Yes, Dan, you could export everything as well. You could export it as a PDF, or you could also just right click any of the images. You can copy it as a PNG if it's image, or you could export it as well. So you'll have that option there to pull these out. From here, let's go ahead and add just some quick floor plans to our scene. These ones should be easy because we've already got them added in. So let's say floor plans. Let's say ground level. Oops. I removed my formatting here. And now we can pull in this ground level. So another nice thing is it pulls it in as that sort of vectorized image there. So we've got the opportunity for that to show up in the background as well. So we've got that ground level floor plan filled in here. Maybe we either need to size it down or adjust the crop region. Let's just size it down a tiny bit so it fits a little bit better. So we can do this, and let's just do this for some organizational. I am a little bit of a presentation junkie and an architecture junkie. So I always like to customize my presentations to a really cool sort of brand theme, right? So we've got our ground level. Now let's go, add in a couple. Again, that's one of the things that's so cool about this is how quickly you can start to iterate over all of your views and all your scenes to create something like, this presentation. We were able to put this together with all the views and the customizations. It's been, 30 minutes overall, which is something that, I on a deadline would have appreciated in my past, right? So we'll add this. And one thing that I want to do too on this one is I want to actually convert this to rounded corners as well. Because I think that looks really nice as a diagram. So let's go here, copy this sheet as well. And then let's do just the sort of rooftop view. So for this one, maybe I want to actually keep this as a reference. So I can just turn the opacity really low on this. And I could also go in, if I want to select all the labels for this one, actually, I'll just go do that really quick. I'll pull it out. Let's just select all these labels themselves. And we'll just remove them really quick. So we'll just use this as sort of a graphic underlay here, and then start layering on information as we go. And I think we're right up on our time limit. So let's do this. Cool. So now we can pull this in, right? And let's have this ground level view. And then let's just drag this in directly on top. It's in the same view styles that we like. We don't need circulation here. And we could just overlap this with the scene, right? So, in this way, we're basically getting to a point where we've, in 30 minutes, we've done all of the views for our scene. We've gotten to a point where, we've created fully rendered views, then we've restyled them to fit a sort of standard for our design concept, laid this out, pulled the program information in, added all of the, inspiration imagery and additional renderings, and then pulled in our sort of like conceptual floor plans. And the big benefit too of this is any changes, because we didn't swap this to BIM mode just yet, our model still is highly editable using just our regular push-pull and editing tools. And then you can always go back into present mode and change any of those. So if a floor plan changes and you only want to update that singular view, you just click update view, it'll pull that in with all the same settings. So that is, I think that basically concludes the entirety of the course. I do appreciate everyone hanging on with me for the duration of that, especially as there were some technical challenges there. But overall, this was a really exciting workflow to get to share with you all. I'm excited to, maybe talk to some of you guys after or hear some, feedback about how the process is going for you guys and sort of building things up. So but with that, I do appreciate everyone's time and obviously the opportunity from PA Academy for us getting to share what we're building. I can safely turn my mic around. So again, yeah, absolutely appreciate it. It was a pleasure to show you guys around. It's a fun workflow to share. So it's a good way to be creative and also kind of talk through some architecture design challenges. To PA Academy team, I'll save this model as well, and we'll put together just a overview of basically the module as well as the geometry and presentation features that we've shown.
Well, thank you, Taylor, so much. This was an incredible workflow. And it's really great to actually see the capabilities of Snaptrude. I have some questions if you can go through them.
That I had the actual chat open the whole time. Let's go to Q&A. So circulation and core layouts, Arena, that one is basically, I think we actually might have answered that on the call. A lot of that can be handled just through your preferred project hierarchy. So like in my case, what I've done is I made a separate department for all of the circulation and cores and things that I needed within the scene. And so you could do that from like a department level, or you could create like a specific like objects to represent those. So there's a lot of different ways that you can handle that. And so part of it just comes down to figuring out like the hierarchy that works with your geometry and your workflows. But what you can do, and when you have department objects and space objects in the scene, the targets that are set for the department level objects are based on that initial grossing factor that we showed in the present mode. So you can modify, I think it's set to a default as 1.4, but you can certainly modify that as you need to set those targets appropriately. And then let's look. So a couple questions, yeah. Gabriel asked about exporting the file to ArchiCAD. There's several export options that you can have within Snaptrude just under that export. So if you do model and drawing, there's a drop down there that'll give you the opportunity to go ahead and select an ArchiCAD export. So we do link in with ArchiCAD. You'd be able to connect it there through it. It's called a .trude file, which is our native file format, which is also associated with the Revit exports as well. Haneen asked, this was a little bit earlier, about how to model this, how to translate, when imported to Revit. For reference, we import into Revit. I don't want to necessarily open Revit because that'll take 20 minutes just to boot up. But as far as like the output goes, when I converted that model to a BIM model, that would be essentially what you'd be looking at in Revit as well. So all that geometry is translated to Revit as Revit families and systems, so that you can go take that over and start modeling it. So Once we did that convert sketch to BIM object there, that would be basically the Revit level of detail that you'd be getting once you transport it. And nor there's not necessarily the ability to do details or sections built into it just yet, partly because the primary use case is that early stage space planning. But as we're starting to build out more of the workflows, that will be obviously coming within the design, Snaptrude workflow as well. So for now, no, but coming, yes.
Okay. Seems like we went through all the questions. There is a question that keeps repeating. How are we gonna get the links and how are we gonna give it to the participants? So guys, we're gonna Taylor is gonna send us the links and we're gonna add it to a Google Drive folder in a document for you guys to access it. We will also name them module 1, 2, and 3. So don't worry about that. You can access that through the workshop post on our website. If you just press watch now and then files and then get course files or download course files, and you will be able to access the drive. So the recordings will be accessed the same way as well in just a few hours from now. So that being said, thank you so much, Taylor, for this incredible workshop, and thank you everyone for joining us. If you have any more questions, you can leave them on Discord. The Discord main server is open. So, and Taylor is there as well, I guess. So
Correct. Yeah, I just joined.
Yeah, great. Well, so if there are any questions and whenever you have time, would be great if you can address them.
Absolutely.
Great. Well, thank you so much then.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. Really appreciate it.